So today I awakened with the pain in the head. I dreamt a Bible prophecy, it filled me with dread. Saw thunderous skies and I saw terrible eyes, and I swear I saw the final day when everything dies. It was an end time sight to see. It was a terrifying mystery. It was an end time vision for me. And I don't know what it means to me. Oh yeah. Now there's nothing that'll make you jump right out of your skin, like a vision of the devil with that evil grin. He was flying over earth, it left my head in a spin. I was face to face with my own long dead king. It seemed like a nightmare, then the strangest thing turned it on its head, made my joyful heart sing. Christianity's savior, with his grace he did bring, and I knew it was the Holy One, the King of Kings. It was an end time sight to see. It was a terrifying mystery. It was an end time vision for me. And I don't know what it means to me. Oh yeah. It was an end time sight to see. It was a terrifying mystery. It was an end time vision for me. And I don't know what it means to me. Oh yeah. To see, that my brothers dwell in peace and unity. Yeah, yeah, it is a precious anointment upon the face of my lover, falling down on Mount Zion, and there can never be another. Yeah, my Lord commanded a blessing, life forevermore. It's a mercy like none other, and resting life forevermore. Me in prayer and belief and confessing, yeah, the sins and transgressions of my life disappearing. Whoa, and grace and mercy envelope my gladdening heart. Yeah, and grace and mercy, God's grace and mercy on me. Yeah. To see, when my brothers dwell in peace and unity. Yeah, yeah, and when all is said and done, when the night grows dark, we shall hear all the angels hark. Yeah, we shall hear all the angels sing. The angels sing, yeah, they sing, sing, sing. We shall hear all the angels sing. Mercy on me. We shall hear the mighty angels sing. No, no, no. We shall hear the angels sing. Yeah. shadow of death. I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. I stumbled, I fell, and I lost my way. Lord, take me by the hand, take my breath away. It's time, I'm exhausted. I've danced too long. My day of days. Too much for my heart to take away. Beloved, dust to dust. The war is coming and it's running after me alone. It's I'm exhausted. I've danced too long. My day of days. Too much for my heart to take away.
Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another Daily Corvid show. We are back once again, but this time we're going to do something, I don't want to call it light-hearted because it's about war, so it's not that light-hearted, but it's going to be a little bit more fun than usual. We're going to be moving away from scripture. We're going to be looking into this book here, The Art of War, officially titled by the author Sun Tzu, which is a fictional Chinese military dictator. But in the words of me, this is not supported by what Google will tell you. This is just my research. This was actually written by a kind of half-famous Jesuit commander called Joseph Amiot. But we won't be talking about him because his life is not really that much different to any other Jesuit priest, you know, lies and deceit and stuff like that. We might do a future version of that. But for now, I want to read you this verse by verse. And the reason we're going to be doing that is to relate it to the current day Islamic jihad, the war in Israel, which in my view, supported by Bibles, verses we've gone through in the past, is going to come here to Europe, Britain and America. So we want to be prepared when these little guys are crawling up the drain pipe looking to get into our lives. If we know the contents of this book here, which we will do by the end of the stream today, we can better plan for their arrival and defeat them. So let's get started. Oh yeah, before I start, his humble servant will be joining us. Let me just add him to the stream. Here we are. Famously, his humble servant, one of my personal friends, ex-professional soldier turned preacher and YouTube favorite of mine. So a big welcome to him. He's going to be annotating some of the things that I read from this book and relating that to real life experience of today. So let's get started. Understanding the nature of war is vital to the importance of the state. Now, there's your first clue. Straight away in that first sentence, we can see this is a military dictator who is straight away saying army, having the control of the army is more important than the actual politicians in the state. That's the first line. Understanding the nature of war is of vital importance to the state. War is the place where life and death meet. It is the road to destruction or eventual survival. It demands study. Now, you won't hear me disagreeing with that. War has 5 decisive factors. These are the things we're going to be talking about first. You must take into account in your planning, and you must fully understand their relevance. First is a moral compass. Second is heaven. Third is the nature of the earth. Fourth is your commander. And fifth is religion. So, before I go any further, the reason it's important we know that this book isn't really written by Sun Tzu is because the guy who actually translated this into English, the one I say wrote this book, he actually used a lot of old Chinese literature to make this book. You know, he translated those Chinese writings into this. But if you know anything about the old Chinese language, you'll know it isn't a very accurate language when you're translating it into English. It's all done in parables. There's no link words. There's no is or and or there or they. It's all, you know, it's all metaphor basically. So this book here is not metaphorical. This is written in proper English. And that says the documents they say that they took this book from, they can't possibly have, because the documents in original official ancient Chinese were not written in full sentences. And they certainly didn't have a lot of the words we use today. So getting back to the text, why do you think the first thing that they make important is having a moral compass?
That's an interesting question. By the way, I believe it's pronounced Sun Tzu.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using the kind of the Chinese way of saying it, but I know over here everyone says Sun Tzu because that's the way it looks. But I mean, the Chinese guy who I discussed it with said it was Sin Shi.
Oh well, look at you
So,
going to the actual authentic sources. That's what I get.
Well,
That's
yeah,
what I
like
get
I'm going to say, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the guy, in my view, it's a fictional character. Anyway.
Agreed. Oh, we agree there. We wholeheartedly. Yeah, we
yeah. So this is another thing. A lot of people will say, "Oh, Sun Shi was or Sun Tzu was a real person," but those of us who have done the study on it, pretty much across the board, will say this is not a real guy. So that will give you an idea why this becomes important in the modern day when you realize that the time when this was written was the same time it was introduced to Islamic cultures. But if you believe Sun Tzu was a real guy, it was actually written much earlier, and it just so happened to come into the hands of the Islamic people at the time they brewed up their original plans for a jihad.
Yeah, and it's been so long since I read this, but of course I got me a nice digital copy, a little different translation, and I have the physical one that you have in your hands on the shelf, the exact same one. But
well, weirdly enough, I had a different one to this originally, but I found that the text in this one was just rolls off the tongue a bit nicer. So, but I mean, that's exactly what I was saying. If you have the original Chinese text that they said they got this from, it doesn't resemble any of the English copies. So I just chose this one because I thought it'd be the easiest one to read. But I mean, like I probably should have kept the other copies handy so we could go through them.
Oh no, you're good. I know I have two physical and then the digital one. I was gonna say what I find interesting, the more we've talked about it, especially the more I can hang with you and think about it, is that the moral law is above everything, and that's interesting because there is no universal morality. So,
well, I think what they're referring to is in Confucianism, which is another falsely authored document of Chinese origin. The moral compass actually means having a strictness in command. So when you're told to do something, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. Morality dictates that when you've been ordered to do something as a servant, you have to do it, whether you agree with it or not. And if you disagree with it that badly, after you've committed it, you will fall on your own sword. That is morals in the moral compass sense of Confucianism, and in fact is transmitted in this book. So that's one of the first things I wanted to point out. Says you have to have a moral compass, but as Humble Servant has correctly observed, that is a very liquid term.
Right. That was the point I'm trying to make, is that if you and I read it, we would read that very differently than somebody else, because there is no universal morality. So I just thought that was interesting because it's before heaven and earth and discipline and method and the commander. Like, it's like, he's the moral law. And I'm like, well, that's a little ambiguous, I would argue, intentionally so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it fits very well with communist policy and actually Islamic policy, because they also see morals as a very liquid term that you can apply in Western terms. If you're having an argument with someone in the West and you just need to win the argument, then you apply Western morals and you style out your conversation in that direction. But if you're in a mosque talking to other Muslims and you are worshipping Allah, you wouldn't go in that direction. You'd go in the Islamic moral direction, which is virtually the opposite thing. So when it says first is moral compass, the first thing that you need to understand to make this book relevant in order to win your wars, what it's actually saying, as we'll find out later, is not what we think morals mean. It's not saying be moral, don't do things that are bad in the eyes of God. It's saying do what you're told by your commander. That is the moral thing. So it's a little bit sneaky. It's going to make you feel like you're completely morally justified while you're doing these things in this book. And that's going to give away something about the later instructions we're going to see. Because if you think about it, why would you need to say to someone, this is totally moral, guys, even when it doesn't feel like it is?
Right.
Perhaps the instructions are going to be immoral and they're going to make you feel shameful and guilty while you're doing them. So we're just heading that up ahead of time, a lot like the Quran does with his Islamic morality. We're saying, even if it feels bad, maybe you don't know what is bad. Maybe only Allah knows what is bad and what is good. So you better do what your commander tells you or Allah tells you. Otherwise, you're not being moral. So we're muddying the waters of how you should feel about doing immoral things by saying, actually, you don't know what moral is. This is moral.
Well, and also it changes the interpretation based on who's reading it too.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I said, right, if I'm a U.S. serviceman or something, then we have a different sense of what morality is.
Yeah.
But if you're, to your point,
enough, the Chinese document which this page was taken from doesn't have the word moral in it at all. It says honorable. It says first is honorableness. Which is completely different to moral compass. So,
their terms for honor, or their belief in what honor is far different than ours. I mean, don't they have this thing called tequila or something? Anyway, that's beside the point. We're on war today, but I'm just saying, at the reader, depending on who's ingesting that, will actually catch it differently, which I think is like a key thing to notice.
I think as we go through the book, this will become clear why they're saying these things, because you're not going to, this is going to make you feel sick when we get towards the end of it. So
I read it once, I remember. No, I was just saying, I read it previously. I remember like reading it and just like, this is interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So first is a moral compass. So we know, as I'm telling you to do these commands, this is moral, is what we're, the underlying kind of between the lines thing is, even if you don't agree with it, this is moral. If you don't do it, you are immoral. Second is heaven. Now there's an interesting statement to find in a book which is supposedly from Chinese mysticism, considering they didn't actually have the same idea of heaven as we do. And the word heaven is a Western word. Heaven describes the Christian heaven. That's where that word comes from. So to say that this book is accurately translated, which it does say in the beginning, but then on the first page have second most important to understand its relevance is heaven, gives away another thing about how this book was translated. So the original word that they would have used is Tian. In Chinese mysticism, Chinese culture, Tian is synonymous with heaven. It's not quite the same. Bad people can get into heaven, and good people sometimes don't make it into heaven. So it isn't anything like the Christian heaven. But as Humble Servant rightly pointed out, you're not supposed to think too hard about this. If we say second most important is heaven, your idea of heaven is supposed to be in your head. And if you add that to the first one, this is moral, not doing this is immoral. If you want to get to heaven, which is the second most important thing after being moral, you have to be doing this. So 2 out of 2 commands so far is this book telling you, doesn't matter how you feel, this is moral. You're not getting into heaven if you do it wrong. Third is the earth. Now, I think what this is actually saying is third is the lay of the land. That's what it means by earth. It's not saying the entire earth, the cultures and people upon it are that important, because they're not. In war, the physical earth you're going to be traversing to meet the enemy, that's most important. So we're going to find out later the more detailed description of that. But I think it's just saying the third most important thing after morals and wanting to get into heaven, doing what your commander tells you so you don't fall foul of not getting into heaven, being immoral. The third most important thing is the lay of the land, which is interesting. Gives away another thing, doesn't it? If you were actually concerned with physical battles and you had to eye up your opponent and you were assessing whether your weapons were as good as theirs or your strategies were going to work, Earth would probably be much more important than number 3 in the list. So it's giving away that this book is not concerned with physical battles until the end. The art of war is to avoid physical battles. And what we're going to find out is the way that is done is by sneaking up behind your opponent and stabbing them in the back before they've had a chance to fairly defend themselves. So first is moral compass. Second is getting into heaven. Third is the way that the battle's going to go. And we know that the reason that is in that order is because you are going to be stabbing people in the back. You are going to be telling them that you're their friend so that they turn their back upon you so you can plunge a knife in it. And in our Western culture here, this is completely immoral. Stabbing people in the back after having lied to them, pretending to be their friend so that you can get the drop on them and kill them is not moral, and neither would it get you into heaven.
Right,
so that's the reason the earth is third.
Yeah, and it's crazy because if you're actually looking at this, like, because I always look at things, we're talking about the art of war, so I look at things from a battlefield perspective. What's crazy here is you're so correct. Like, heaven is not a thing. Like heaven wouldn't even, like, the lay of the battlefield, because that actually limits not just your tactics, but in today's world, what equipment you can bring. So, for example, because people always like this stuff broken down. For example, there was a time when people were talking about war with North Korea, and I was trying to explain, because everybody, on the internet, they just like to yell and scream, but they don't like think war, right? Like, oh, we'll take down Kim Jong-un. Like, hold on. Because I was explaining to somebody, in North Korea, you don't get the option of tanks because it's mountainous. So you lose the advent of tanks. But most people, they don't process war like that. That's why, like, that being down to 3 is interesting to me, because, like, where heaven, like, when you actually talk about real war, heaven is the thing you don't want to see, because that means you're
dead.
Yeah, right. So,
well, like, it's weird. I think the reason they put that in that order is because if you're if you're under this guy's command, the guy who knows this stuff is going to be the commander. Incidentally, that's going to be the fourth most important thing, is obedience to your commander. So assuming that if you know these things off by heart, even when you lose track of your commander and you can't receive his orders, you will be able to correctly guess what he wants you to do based on the fact that you have a moral compass and that you want to go to heaven. Because obviously these things are meted by the obedience to your commander.
Yep.
But I think the reason why third is earth and then fourth is commander, after having the idea of heaven as second, is because everyone wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to burn in hell.
Yep.
But in our culture, if you spend your life lying to people, tricking people into friendship so that you can kill them by stabbing them in the back, then taking over their country to hand over to a military dictatorship, you ain't going to heaven, brother. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
So they put that in there to make you think, no matter what you think about this, moral compass is first. So your morals are wrong. Throw those away. This is moral. We're telling you that. The reason why morality is important in war is so you can go to heaven after you've had the war. So, you know, we're saying all the bad stuff that Western guys aren't allowed to do. You know, the rules of engagement don't apply to you. You're going to go to heaven anyway through this morality. And that's why the earth, the lay of the land, like the mountainous terrain or plains or whatever it is less important than those first two things. Fourth is the commander. So it's saying obedience to your commander is 1 and 2. But the actual guy who is your commander isn't that important. He's 4. So what that says is the commander is this. Whoever the physical human commander is, if they're killed and they're replaced by someone, or even if it's you that ends up replacing them, the most important thing is that you're doing it via this. So we know this is actually a religious doctrine to the military who use it. It's not just a simple strategy planning guide. This actually underpins how the soldier is going to get into heaven and the morality, which is the most important thing.
And that's super interesting. Like, again, I'm just taking the soldier's point of view, right? So what's really interesting about that is when you say the commander, right? The fact that he's down there is really interesting because in battlefield or in war, people will try to take out commanders. Why? Because you will lose what's called command and control. So then that number 5, which I'm sure you're going to get to in a second, becomes very key because, you know, there is no commander to issue the next commands, right? So the fact that commander's down there is really weird because I need him, just like he needs his commander till you get all the way up to the general, right? For command and control. Without that, you're aloof. You have more risk of what we call blue on blue unaliving or a friendly. Y'all know the other word, you know what I'm saying?
Panic fire.
Panic fire. Or no, literally
disorganized. Bullets are not that visible, especially when the light is low. So you can hear guns going off and be running towards the bullets. You
want to know where your friend is because you don't want friendly fire, right? So you want to know where your friend is. That's another important piece. I'm not going to go into like actual battlefield technology, but that's another important piece of the commander as well. Like he's supposed to be in communication with these other entities. Like, for example, if you have a captain over a platoon, you know, you have 4 squads in your platoon, you got to know who each squad is. Just giving you battlefield examples. So like the fact the commander's like way down here, it's like, well, wait a minute. Like that guy actually on a real battlefield is kind of important.
Well, I mean, it's not written in here, but you kind of think the guy that's the commander who is actually talking to the troops directly, he's actually a troop. He's not really a commander. The commander's not going to be on the battlefield, is he? The one who writes this book, he ain't never seen a battlefield in his life.
Well, the guy who wrote the book, that's a whole different story. Yeah, he's likely never been on one. But the way command works, and again, I was not an infantryman, so I don't try to be cool than I am. But there's commanders on the ground. So every company has a captain. I believe each squad I know has a sergeant. It's been a while, so my brain's a little rough. But like there is technically people in charge on the ground, and then there's somebody in charge of them, not with them.
Yeah.
So it's a big chain. You know, it's a big the chain of command again, which is.
I think that's what this is getting at.
Yeah.
Fourth being the commander means the chain of command. If someone gets killed, you then will default to the next guy up. So really, if you know the letter of the law of this book, when you're putting it into practice, then that's morality and that will get you to heaven. Even if your commander dies, the platoon shouldn't lose their organizational structure if they know what to do already. So really, the commander is a spiritual commander who is written inside this book. So it's exactly like the Quran, where they think they're worshipping Allah, but their only experience of Allah is the Quran. Like we know from our who was that guy we had the debate with? I did a parody video on his rubbish answers. Formidable Faith.
Oh, okay.
Farid, where he was like claiming at the beginning of the video, I've seen Allah, I've heard Allah's words, I've experienced the throne of Allah. But then we're under questioning, under intense scrutiny, he admitted he hadn't seen him. You can't ever see him. He hadn't heard him, and he hadn't been to the throne room. And in fact, the whole thing was a made-up, unconscious vision that he
gave you a
copied
Hollywood
off
script.
someone else.
Yeah, he gave you a Hollywood script. That was crazy, bro. That was crazy.
Dude, I wish we could see that guy again. Like, I haven't seen or heard from him since. I think he like recoiled into the recesses of Islamic doctrine and
he went to the
rest
abyss.
of his life. I would love to see that guy again. I really would.
Yeah, and this is an important thing that you identified to start with the document itself, which is the reader takes away certain things. The former soldier, first of all, I don't agree with the order. But second of all,
oh no, neither do I. I absolutely think you're right there. Commander should be nearer the top, definitely.
Yeah, but I'm just pointing,
really.
Yeah, but I'm just pointing out that how right you are is that, like, when I read it, I would take away something totally different than someone maybe doing the J word. I'm trying to keep things, neutral for YouTube for your channel, but you know the word I'm talking about. You use it all the time. So that's the difference of like reading this and understanding it from different perspectives. It's very.
Should we start calling it the hijad?
Let's call it the hijad. I like that. The hijad.
Islamic hijad.
Yeah, when you're on the hijad, this may be a better order for you, but on a real battlefield for me, that was not the order. But again, that's the difference in reading something for from your perspective as opposed to the intent or seeing the other person's perspective who might be on hijad.
So that's the first four. Then the fifth one is religion. Now, in the Chinese culture, they didn't accept you in their armies if you weren't of the Confucius, or it wasn't called Confucius back then, the Chinese spirituality. If you didn't believe in the Tao, their idea of Tian and their king being an earthly god, that's what they thought. They thought whoever was the king was an earthly god. His children would become earthly gods when they succeeded the throne, and heaven would be administrated by that earthly king. So if you didn't swear allegiance to that guy, or if you ever said anything rude about him, off with his head kind of thing, you would be pretty quickly dead. So fifth thing being religion is not in the original Chinese book. What it actually says in the original book is fifth is observance of order, or orderly observance, which means the chain of command. So we know morals, heaven, earth, commander, orderly command. That's the five things. I know it's crazy, but when we get later into the book, you'll realize this is not a battle guide. This is not telling you how to win individual battles. This is telling you how to effectively charm your opponents to think that you're their friends, so that they turn their back on you, that then you can stab them in the back. This entire book is about stabbing people in the back. Which is why I think it's very interesting that the first thing that you have to remember to understand this is moral compass.
Yeah, well, it's
when you're stabbing people in the back, you're telling yourself, but it's moral. It's definitely moral.
It's in line with my morals. That's what you'll be telling you, But the interesting thing is the translational choices. The one I have on my screen as number 5 says method and discipline. So that's
that could work as well. I mean, it's it's a different wording, but ultimately it's going to lead you in the same direction.
No, for sure. I was just making a note of how interesting that translational difference was, because the method, and then we all know what discipline is over there on hijad. You know what I mean? We all know what that means. So it's just interesting to see it. Like I said, taking this in. I'm glad we're doing this, taking this in, and backstabbing. There's one in the book. I'll drop you a link later that we can cover that talks about masterful backstabbing. I mean, it's straight from Satan himself. We'll cover that at a different time. But definitely you highlighting this order. When I think about groups on hijad, it really does shine a different light on it. I'll be honest, because when I read this the first time many years ago, I read it as a U.S. soldier. So I didn't even see.
Oh, no, the same with me. I didn't read it as a soldier, but when I first read this, I was in terms of like a soldier from the West. I was thinking, right, if I'm a Western soldier and I've got my chain of command and I've got my Bible, I'm defending America or Britain, that's how I read it. But I think by the time we get to the end of the book, you'll realize this is a stateless policy.
Right. No. That's
the reason why it says honor and commander and religion and all these other things is by the time you've read this, you realize these guys are like a stateless military. They're not supporting a nation. They're not even supporting a ruler. They're not even supporting God. They are building a new culture out of the military control, which they are going to gain by stabbing their enemies in the back and telling their soldiers, you must obey me. And if you don't, you're immoral. Yeah. So it is the dictatorship guide, really.
Well, and the point I'm trying to make to people is that if you read this with your own morals, you wouldn't even see it. Because we're Christians, right? Of course, you'd be like, well, of course I'm going to be moral on a battlefield. I'm not going to, do anything immoral. Like, of course, God's looking down on me. You'll read it from a completely different perspective than the one we're revealing if you don't have that same set of moral code or foundation.
Well, I think it's
especially during
interesting
hijab.
how you say, of course, I'm not going to do anything immoral because God's always watching me.
Yeah, right.
And that's how, when I first read this, that's how I thought. I thought that's what they mean, morality in terms of God. But then I remember that the Chinese documents this was written from by Joseph Amiot, they think that the king is God.
Right,
And then
right.
they say the king is overruled by the general. The commander overrules the general. The general and the commander overrules the king of state. So even though the king is God, this guy overrules him when it comes to fighting the war. So if the king says no to something, you do it anyway. And if your soldiers are tasked with either following the king, who is God, or the military commander, guess who they're going to be following? This guy, because they won't get to heaven otherwise, despite the fact that the king is the administrator of heaven.
Right.
So it gives you a dual purpose if you're a soldier, doesn't it? So you're going to be telling the king one thing, and you're going to be secretly doing this. So it's a revolutionary policy. If your king isn't your king isn't directly the general, which very rarely happens, if ever happens, you're going to be following this guy, but telling the king you're doing it in his purpose.
Yeah, and what I will say is a masterfully written dual meaning book. Like I have to say, like it's actually incredible.
Well, I think anyone who wants to know how to detect a good liar, read this book. Because even though people don't realize they're doing it, when they are in the full swing of deceiving someone, you will recognize the descriptions of deceit in this book are so well done. When you see other people doing it, you recognize that's the same spirit they're using. So the guy who wrote this book was directly inspired by the same spirit that's making that person deceitful. Yeah, they're drawing on that same spirit that's making them lie to you and put so much enthusiasm into their lies as this guy put into writing this book. Oh, man. So we go back to the 5 points. We're going to break them down a little bit more in detail now. So moral compass, it says, a moral compass brings the people into accord with their ruler so that they will follow him in life and into death without fear. Which I think is important to think that a moral compass brings people into accord with their ruler. Once again, we know the ruler he's talking about that you're getting brought into accord with is not God. It's not even the king who would be God. It's the guy who you are following, your commander, who is the fourth most important thing. So if we decode that, your moral compass is the thing that brings you into accord with your ruler. So if your moral compass isn't the same as his, if you have your own Christian morals or whatever, that's not going to bring you into accord. That's going to get you thrown out the unit. And the reason why you need to be in accord with your ruler is so that you will follow him in life and into death without fear. So you have to be willing to martyr yourself without fear, which is flipping impossible if you ask me, but that's what you're being told to do here. And you're following this guy, your commander, who is the fourth most important thing, into this battle based on his morals. So that's the reason why heaven is the second most important thing, because if you're following someone else to your death, is that you? Oh, yeah, nice one. Yeah, I wonder why that happened. So if you're following someone else to your death via their morals, is God going to accept that as an excuse? When you are at the feet of God after you've been killed in a jihad, you've martyred yourself, killing a bunch of innocents. When God says, how do you explain this? Is it going to be okay if you go, well, I was just following this guy, his morals. I was following his morals because this book told me to. Is that going to get you into heaven?
Right. Look.
No, of course not.
Of course not. Right. And the thing that got me while I hit the share button, sorry, I guess I should have warned you. My bad.
That's all right.
Is it says complete accord in my translation. So what that means is you can have no disagreement about the ruler in any capacity. Like whatever goes on, your morality is now whatever the ruler says. That's wild, bro. That's wild.
Yeah. You know what? I've got to say, I like that translation, though. The reason I chose this one is because it's the quickest to get through. And it roundabout says the same thing. It's just less words for me to get through. But anyone who's thinking of buying this book, which I would highly recommend, that's the one to buy because it has more information in there. It's more of an accurate portrayal of Joseph Amiot's view on the jihad, the tactics and strategies which they are using and are going to use in future to defeat Western culture. That's exactly why we're going through this. These guys are out the gates now. They're in position. We're out of position, which we'll find out is by design of them. So when this goes from stealth jihad into open jihad in our countries, the way it has in Israel, they know all about it there. It's going to be in our benefit to know that this is what they're doing. So moral compass brings people into accord with the ruler, who is the commander, so that they will martyr themselves without question and follow his morals, and they won't think, oh, I shouldn't do this. And there's no hesitation allowed. It's got to be complete surrender to the commander and his morals. And if you don't do that, you're not getting to heaven according to this. That's point 1. Point 2, heaven encompasses night, day, heat and cold, and the changing of the seasons. So why would that be the second most important thing when you are planning your strategy in war?
Well, this funny thing is, for me as a soldier, right? I'm gonna teach you a little soldiering 101, right? Normally, at least in the US, we don't start wars in the winter. Like, so this is I'm talking about our perspective on soldiers, right? You know, just so you get the soldier's perspective when I read it, right? We don't normally start war in the winter. Why? Because winter's harsh. That's like a common thread in history. Like, you don't want to fight during the winter. So when I read it the first time, that is how I read it. Like, oh yeah, okay. So you want to think about seasons, night and day. Also, you'll learn about things like nautical twilight, which is why the enemy normally attacks you right when the sun goes down, because your eyes are adjusting. Y'all will learn all these cool things if you're really into warfare and all that stuff. But that's the way I read it the first time. I'm really curious to hear your breakdown from the Islamic perspective on what this means. I got to hear it. But that's how a soldier read it. That's literally how I read it the first time.
Well, this is my speculation now. This is how I break this down. But the reason heaven encompasses night, day, heat, cold, and the changing of the seasons, these are all things which are going to affect your morale, your motivation to follow the commands that you're given. Bearing in mind, they're not based on your morality. These aren't commands you agree with. It doesn't matter whether you agree with them or not. It doesn't matter whether you think they're immoral or not. The fact is, heaven, which is number 2 of importance, is where you want to end up when you inevitably get killed on the battlefield. So whether it's night, day, whether it's hot or cold, whichever season it is, you will be following what your commander is saying and his morals if you want to get to heaven. And it's interesting you say the thing about you don't want to start your military campaign in the winter, because knowing that was almost one of the reasons why I thought, well, God's war against Satan will start in the winter, because he's going to want to flex the fact that he can win in any conditions, night, day, cold, whatever season. God will not be deterred from gaining a victory over Satan, and he will make it impossible for Satan to win by stacking the odds in his own favor and making Satan wish that he'd never bloody bothered in the first place. So that means starting in the nighttime, in the winter, from a rocky terrain with mountains there. And that's exactly what we've seen in Israel, because the border region between Lebanon, Syria, and Israel has a mountain range across it and a little tiny valley through the middle, which is where the Mount of Olives is, which we know from our reading of Zechariah and Revelations, is where the Lord is going to be stood watching this unfold. In the final moments of the chances of Satan's army to turn back, like right up until the last second, Jesus is going to give them an opportunity to repent, stop what they're doing and turn back. And he'll be stood there as they're going through the valley of death. That's what it's described as, the valley of death. But we know they are too foamy-mouthed and angry and ignorant to do it. They hate God. They're not going to listen. They don't believe on Jesus, despite he's there. And that is why, bearing in mind this was written, the English of this was definitely written by this Jesuit guy, Joseph Amiot. So even though he had Chinese documents to make this from, he himself was a Jesuit Catholic. So he wants you to think, as a soldier following your commander, heaven encompasses night and day. So whichever one you're told to move in, you move in, preferably night. That's why it comes first. And we know if you're going to stab someone in the back, you need to sneak up on them. And if it's a nighttime, they are less likely to see you approaching. So night's first, then day, heat and cold, and the changing of the seasons. So we're talking about time passing. Heaven encompasses night and day, heat and cold, and the changing of the seasons. That means it's going to be a long campaign. It's not like in a boxing match where you're like ding and then you start punching each other straight away. There's no gap between that. There's no strategy period. This is letting us know, if you are following your commander, you will have to be patient. You will have to wait for the order. Even if it looks like a good time to strike, you don't strike until you are told to.
Oh man,
and that is why heaven requires that you have a servitude of your commander. Even though he's number 4, he is commanding you via the spirit of this book. So the real commander is that spirit. And that's why heaven encompasses night, day, heat, cold, and the changing of the seasons. So that's number 2.
Just want to jump in right quick and say something, because people won't really understand what you're saying about that gap. War has many lulls. Okay, war is not constant battle. Like you said, it's not like ding, and then we all just go out to this little middle area. No, we're not in the Revolutionary War anymore. Like, it doesn't work like that. So like
it's not like rugby.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like American football where everyone just bundles in and tries to
kick off and like raw. No, it doesn't work like that. Like there's many lulls, many gaps, and it actually can be really weird. So that waiting to strike thing that Brother Daily Corbett just brought up is actually a very real thing. I have real battlefield testaments to how the enemy does that and so forth. But go ahead, keep on. I just want to add that.
So we reach number 3, the first physical one, which actually is relatable to having a physical battle. Earth. Earth encompasses nearness and distance, ease and hindrance, wide plains and narrow gorges, matters of life or death. So this is more likely what people were expecting they were going to find when they read this book. Earth encompasses nearness and distance. You know, the distance when you are, you know, if you've got a gun and you need to know the distance you're shooting over. If it's a longer distance, there's a calculation to be made when the bullet's going to move around while it's in the air and drop. So you've got to calculate, I shoot here and the bullet ends up there.
Yes.
Or nearness is like how much time you've got before you clash with your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Ease and hindrance. Now, this is a little bit more difficult to explain, but I'll do my best.
I'm going to share my translation while you read your translation as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So ease and hindrance. Ease is like if there's no obstacles in your way, if you're on flat ground, there's no rivers to traverse, you know, you're not wading through quicksand or something like that. Hindrance means difficult terrain. So lots of debris and obstacles to get over. And then at the end of it, you've got a large hill to climb. So the earth is telling you, try and attack from the back, because we know that's what we're going to end up reading. It's all a backstab. And in order for your backstab to be effective, you need to lead your foe into the difficult terrain and come from behind so that the difficult terrain is ahead of them so that they can't escape. But you have an easy, you have an easy route to them. That's why that's there. Then we move on to 4. The general must be possessed of wisdom, honesty, benevolence, courage, and discipline. Although it actually says here, Sun Tzu incorporates philosophical principles from both Confucianism and Taoism. See, I knew they'd give it away. So that's the author saying, even though we're using Western terms, we're saying wisdom, honesty, benevolence, courage, and discipline, all Western words. The actual original Chinese didn't have any of those words in. Well, it would have had honor instead of honesty. It would have had piety instead of benevolence, which is like the family love. You defend your family first and your people of your nation first. And it would have had knowledge instead of wisdom. And knowledge is this, reading of this. But the reason these are important is because this is the general. This is not the soldiers. This is how the soldiers have to talk of the general. So if you're reading this, bearing in mind the moral compass and getting to heaven relies on you knowing your general and following his commands, observing his morals, the general must be possessed of wisdom, honesty, benevolence, courage, and discipline. So you don't have to have any of these things. You're a soldier. You do what you're told. You don't have these things. If you have these things, if you have honesty, benevolence, courage, and discipline to yourself, you're more likely to say no when those immoral commands are issued to you. But if the general possesses wisdom, honesty, benevolence, courage, and discipline, and you don't, and you're obedient to him, not only will you be more happy to follow his commands, you will give an excuse to him if those commands seem to be immoral. So that's the reason why the general must possess these things, not you, if you're following this.
Well, and also, so they tell you the commander, my translation, stands for these things. So that's it's just saying de facto, that's what he stands for. You remember, let's use that hijab. Don't think too much now. Don't think too much. Don't ask questions. You know what I'm saying? Certain folks know best, right? But the point I want to highlight is it's saying you're supposed to be in complete accord with him already. So regardless of whatever it's listed there, whether, wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, or strictness in my translation, right, that I have on screen, that's cool. But even if he didn't, it doesn't matter because you have to be in complete accord with the commander.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the point they're trying to make here. They're trying to say your commander, even though you don't think he does, even though some of his commands might seem immoral to you, your commander has wisdom, honesty, benevolence, courage, and discipline or strictness. He has those things. So you must be wrong. So you better follow his commands. And
there you go.
Our understanding of the Quran, because we know at the end of Al Imran, when Allah appears in the sky and he's commanding his hijadis forward, he says from the cloud, "Who will follow Allah?" And it's like he's giving them a war cry, like a really strong message to war. even though what he's actually telling them to do, technically what he's telling them to do is he's commanding them to stab a bunch of people in the back and kill a whole village, women and children and everyone else. And the reason that they're doing this is because they don't know about Allah. So they haven't even been introduced to Allah. They've never seen a Quran. They've never met Muhammad. As far as they're concerned, their little whatever religion they have already, that's the true religion. So even if they were given the option to and said no, that would be better in moral terms than what Allah is telling them to do. But he sidesteps the whole moral thing by first of all setting himself up as having wisdom, honesty, benevolence, courage, and strictness, the same as Allah does. And then he appears in the clouds after this and goes, "Who will stand with Allah? Who will kill those filthy Jews?" And he does this whole speech to them in the Quran to encourage them forward without having any thought. So they don't have a chance to question their own wisdom or honesty or courage. He is commanding them. And we know if they don't follow his commands, other Muslims will kill you if you don't follow the commands in that situation. And that's like here. If the general possesses these things and you don't want to agree with him, by nature of that, you don't possess these things, and the other soldiers are not going to be happy with you. So other soldiers might kill you. So this is saying, be loyal to your commander because he has these attributes. And the unsaid thing is, if you don't, you lack these attributes and you're out. And that means off with your head.
And what's crazy to contrast that with the U.S., right? We have stories littered through history of people following the commander and that not being an excuse. Whether it's something like the My Lai massacre or whether it's Abu Ghraib or whatever. That's why we don't live by the commander's always right, because when it comes time for a tribunal or something of that nature, you cannot just be like, but the commander said, like, it doesn't. No, we used to talk. And the funny thing is, just so people are aware out there, we used to talk about some of these things at war. Like my team,
that's when you're going to talk about it the most is just before a battle or just after a battle, because it's like relevant to you. Like this stuff here, the relevance of this is in the commander's orders to you. You don't get a chance to argue it. You know, you can't discuss these things. You have to apply these or you're out. Whereas I think people take for granted when they're slagging off America's army or America in general, in God we trust. Even though they might have corrupt politicians or you might not agree with their military campaigns, they are beholden to their first in command, and he is beholden to God. So everything, and that's why they have this tribunal system, everything is under God. And if you don't do the letter of God's law, even though they might argue about the, interpretations of it, you will be punished, whether you are the first in command, whether you are the lowliest soldier. If you do something really bad on the battlefield, somebody's going to see it, and it will get back, and you will be punished for it.
And as the lower guy, you'll be at the court martial while the general gets forced to retire. Just a little tidbit for everybody else out there. The general is going to go home to his house with his retirement check, but you, the lower guy, the guy who told you all these things, nah, you go in the court martial and you go in the, if you're in the army, you go into Leavenworth and you're gonna make big rocks, little rocks. You might have to make them big rocks again. So that's why I say, hey, don't cut the braid off out there, but that's for sure.
Honestly, I'm sure there's so many people who put in that situation would rather be smoking rocks than pulling rocks out the ground.
Listen, I'm telling you,
it's so depressing.
Yeah, and we also it's crazy, what gets discussed at war. Just a quick aside. Now again, I was not an infantryman. Everybody knows that I was not an infantryman. But we used to discuss one of the topics of conversation. I'll give you this. I won't say who's a part of the conversation. It was a war zone conversation. But the conversation came up with, could you confiscate arms from American citizens? And I was like, no, that's unconstitutional. What are you talking about? I would never do that. I would never, ever do that. And there were some people who were like, well, we were giving orders, though. And I'm not going to say who those people were because we're going to be nice. It's not, like I said, it's a war zone. No judgment here. But just to show you that some people have an actual moral compass, which the war told me, hey, look, you just follow the commander, you. And some people are just like, I just, like me, I wouldn't. Some people are just like, well, the commander said so. Yeah, it's wild.
I always, in my idealized head, I always think if you say no to your commander and later it can be proven that you were actually correct, you will get a promotion through having demonstrated your strength of spirit. Because I feel like, especially when you've got other men under your command, if you're the kind of guy who flakes out at a challenge like that, even when it's tough, you're not going to be an effective leader. Nobody's going to be no one's going to be motivated by following you. Whereas if you're a guy who has a history of saying no to a commander, being punished for several years, and then being proven right, and you stuck to your guns the whole time, that might actually make you a far more effective leader. And certainly for me, if I'm leading a commander into a war, I might die. That's the guy I want to follow. Someone who has strong conviction and morals and has a history of saying no to a ridiculous command. Because if I'm following this guy into death, I want to know he is taking these commands on with intelligence. I don't want to be following rubbish commands just because he is.
Yeah, man. One of the best.
This is the opposite. This is saying there are no rubbish commands. There's only rubbish soldiers who don't follow commands.
Right, right. Well, one of my best leaders, like he eventually made it to the top of the enlisted chain in terms of the E scale, right? So he made it to Sergeant Major E9. And one time he told me, it was great. We had a conversation. He said, of course, he said, I could send you to your death. Yeah. Like if we had to charge Hill something, yeah, I could send you to your death. But what he wouldn't do is have us sent to our death or have us do something like extremely immoral. Like he wasn't about that. But if it was like a basic battlefield requirement for our mission that it required me to go to my death or something, he was all about it. He was like, yeah, I would. And again, it was great to have that conversation because it wasn't, the thing about it is when you're a soldier, like things aren't personal. It's not like, well, you know, this and that. It's like, we got a mission to accomplish, just kind of how it goes. And that's why I say you make a lot of peace with you make peace, with a lot of things on an actual battlefield. Like, you know, You know,
that's one of the things that really annoys me the most about the Hijadis. The whole approach that they take is they trivialize their own deaths. And by doing that, they actually trivialize the sacrifice of good soldiers from every country. Like, think about it like this. You just said yourself, you might well be sent to your death as part of a mission, and you will go. You'll die, or your friends will die, and you might be lucky to come back. But you got sent on a suicidal mission for the sake of the army seeing a victory, and you will go. That's your job. If you come back, it'd be more luck than skill.
More blessing. More blessing than
skill. Yeah, and these guys are saying, no, everyone should be expected to die on the battlefield, and if you don't, you won't go to heaven. It's almost like the opposite. It's almost like saying, as soon as you sign up for being a soldier, the reason why you're going to get into heaven is because you're going to die being a soldier. If you don't, you haven't done the job properly. And that's exactly how the Islamic Hijaz see it. It's martyrdom is the top of the tree. If you want that tent full of holy virgins, you want to meet Allah and go through the door of great honor, you need to be martyred. It even specifically says, if you die in any other way, or if you're killed in any other way, you ain't getting those virgins, brother, and you ain't meeting Allah. You're not going through that door of holy honor because you didn't martyr yourself. So you better get out there, kill some Jews, and make sure you die. So it trivializes the fact that people choose to do that for their country or their brothers or the sake of the mission succeeding, whereas these guys are just forced into it, and they don't even know why half the time. So it's almost like, oh, we're going to, you know, the mission's going to fail. Well, let's blow ourselves up anyway. Then we can still get our martyrdom, even though the mission fails or the country falls. So it's completely selfish. It's like rips all the good, moral, courageous stuff out of war and replaces it with this horrible, sneaky, backhanded slavery. It's really hard for me to actually talk about it without swearing. Like, that's why I keep stopping every now and again.
You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job.
So anyway, we'll go back to the text. So that's number 4. So we've got moral compass, follow your ruler, even if it means your death, especially if it means your death. And if you don't, you are immoral and bad, which means 2, you won't get into heaven. Heaven's the reason why you are being patient in war, even though you really want to kill all the enemies you've been told to kill. Like, it's not like you're morally choosing that these are bad guys or that you should kill them. The reason you want to kill them is because we've told you to, and you're following the commander. If you don't accept these as your enemies and want to kill them, you'll not go to heaven, but you have to be willing to wait for the command to be given. So even though the intense hatred and wish to kill others who haven't done anything to you is yours, you internalize that hate, you internalize that need to kill the enemy, the order isn't coming from you. You are on lead. The order's coming from the guy holding the lead. This guy, the commander, even though he's 4th in importance, it's not the king or the ruler of your country who is the administrator of heaven, and it isn't the Christian God. It is this guy. So you're a slave of this guy, which, as we know, is exactly how Quran treats Muslims. You're a slave of Allah. If you don't die in a martyrdom, you ain't getting your virgins. It's as simple as that.
Right.
So then we move on to regulation, which is religion in this one. I know in his one's going to say regulation. Religion means marshalling of the enemy, correct organization, and controlling your supplies effectively. So this is another one which, now we've spoken about the general, you know, the general has to have all these high and mighty attributes that you can follow his order and not argue with it. Now we're back to the practicalities of war. Marshalling of an army means making everyone's lined up correctly. When you say turn left, they all know which direction is left, and they all lockstep and turn left. You know, you don't want people doing it late or accidentally moving right. In fact, there's a large part of this removed, which is in the original Chinese. There's a story at this point in the Chinese one. And what happens is Sun Tzu is employed by this king who is under threat. He's going to lose his kingdom, right? And the reason is he's got these millions and millions of people in the country, and none of them respect him. They don't respect him. They don't respect his order. They don't respect his military. And it's because his military has fallen to disrepair. Most of his money is spent on concubines. He's got an army of concubines. And he says to Sun Tzu, do you actually think that you can save my kingdom with an army of concubines? Because if you can prove to me that you can train these concubines to be an effective armed unit, I will hand control of my kingdom over to you until the war is won. That's how this whole book starts. So they haven't put it in here, but in Humble Servants one, it will be in there. So what happens is Sun Tzu lines up a bunch of concubines and he says, right, when I beat the drum, turn left. When I beat the drum twice, you turn right. And if I beat the drum 3 times, you do a full turn. Does everyone understand that? And he spends time with each concubine, convincing them that this is the thing to do, teaching them, making sure they know it, makes the concubine repeat the order back, 1 gong left, 2 gongs right, 3 full turn. And they say, yes, sir, anything you say, sir, you know, in their little concubine way. He has them all lined up. And the king has a favorite concubine. She's the least effective one. She claims that she's listened. You know, she knows 1 gong left, 2 gongs right, all the rest of it. But she's not taking this seriously whatsoever. And because she's not, the rest of the concubines are looking at her and they're thinking, well, she's getting away with making light of it. So I'll do what she's doing. You know, I'll have what she's having kind of attitude. So Sun Tzu bangs the drum once, which means turn left. Half of them turn left. Some of them turn right. And some of them just don't move. He bangs the drum twice. Some of them turn right. Some of them turn left. Some of them don't move. The main favorite one, the favorite concubine, starts laughing. And he bangs the drum 3 times. And by this point, the concubines are not interested. None of them follow any commands. They're all just laughing about it. And the king sat there scratching his head thinking, this is not an army. Like, you haven't done a good job here. So Sun Tzu approaches the head favorite concubine and says, did you understand 1 gong left, 2 gongs right, 3 gongs full turn? Did you understand that like you said you did before? And she said, yep, I understood it fully. And he says, right, I'm going to give you one more opportunity to do this and demonstrate this to me. Otherwise, you will be severely punished. And she goes, yeah, fine. Okay, then obviously she doesn't believe that he's going to have the authority to punish her because she's the favorite concubine. So they go through the whole thing again. They do exactly the same thing. She laughs. She doesn't turn left, right, or whatever. And Sun Tzu stops the parade dead. Takes a sword and takes her head off without a word. Doesn't warn anyone he's going to do it. Doesn't consult the king. The king is in tears. His favorite concubine is now headless, bleeding out on the turf. And he turns to the rest of the 9 left and goes, right, you're the leader now. Please line up and try again. And they do it flawlessly.
Perfectly. Yeah, I heard that story before.
He has told his army, ignore this guy, the king. You don't serve the king. You serve me. You do what I tell you. You observe my order. Otherwise, that will happen to you. And from that day forward, his army was organized. And they have the marshalling of the army, which this is talking about here. So marshalling of the army, as we saw there, is very important. Punishable by death in this and also in Islamic hijab. Correct organization and control of supplies. So why is control of supplies likely to be an important thing in the art of war? It's because, as we know, you're planning to sneak up behind your enemy and stab them in the back. So you might have a long wait before this opportunity presents itself. And if the winter comes, or if it's too cold or the terrain's too nasty, you lose the opportunity. You have to have sufficient control of supplies in order to safely make it to the time when you will attack without starving, without running out of water, and still be an effective fighting unit when that happens. Now, the thing that is, maybe I should have used your translation because there's lots of bits missing. There's another bit missing out of this one, which says control of supplies doesn't just mean your supplies.
Right.
Control of supplies also involves any supplies that you can get handy. So it's your enemy's supplies, things you can take from civilians, whatever's lying around. So control of supplies means everything that's within earshot, eyesight, or within arm's reach of you in your war against the enemy It's moral for you to take if your commander tells you to, which they will. So we know. Marshalling off the enemy, doing the thing before, so you don't get your head cut off, and then telling your other soldiers, look, guys, or women, if it's women, don't disobey the commander because I don't want to see you get your head cut off and have to take your job in that way. So please do what you're told. So the soldiers will be telling each other, you better bloody do what you're told, because this guy, he means business. He will off your head and you'll be lying on the turf without it on your shoulders. Correct organization and control of supplies is important because it includes theft. Now, this is why they've taken it out of this book. This is obviously a Chinese supported authorized version. We don't want people to think that the Chinese military doctrine, which the Islamic hijadis have accepted, is an order for the soldiers to steal off civilians, because the civilians you're going to be near, they're probably your own people. Yeah? You haven't actually gone over to your, they think you're friends. These guys you're about to sneak up on, you haven't sneaked up on them yet. They're across the difficult terrain. You're still at home with your guys. But if you have to wait a year, 2 years until you get that opportunity, and probably the reason you're going to war with them is because you're running out of resources, where are you going to get those resources from? Well, you're going to control their supplies by commandeering them and then telling them, don't let those guys over there know that this is happening. So we know in one short sentence, you're stealing, you are lying, and you are enslaving your own native civilian population in order that you can commandeer their supplies. And if you don't do this, remember, 1 is moral compass, 2 is heaven. If you don't do this on command of your commander, you are immoral, you are not going to heaven, and you will be beheaded. Then you won't go to heaven. So it's incredibly important. And this is only page 2, by the way, guys. It's incredibly important to the art of war and the Islamic hijadi doctrine, which they are following, that you are 100% committed to your human commander, who is the acolyte of God and King. Remember, he overrules both these guys in the battle. You're his slave, not theirs. Even though he's going to tell you, you serve the king, you serve Allah, you serve someone else. No, you serve this guy. If you don't, no heaven for you, no virgins.
Well, and it's so crazy, like taking this in, like as I go back, I remember, because what they teach you in warfare is, and some people may even remember this from the last Iraq war, like supply lines can be cut. And so if your supply line breaks, you can't keep moving forward. So if I don't know if people remember, but like in the last Iraq war, at one point we outran our supply line. So like everybody had to like kind of like wait, for lack of a better phrase, on a battlefield. So that's an important piece of war, is having supplies, because if you don't have them, well, you're technically combating.
Well, the enemy's going to see you as an easy meal, aren't they? Especially in the middle of a boiling hot desert when you've got 50 pounds of gear on and a massive 22-pound rifle, however much it weighs. If you're out in the desert with the sun beating down on you and you've got no water and you have to wait there for 2 days, you're screwed. You need water. You're not going to last 2 days with no water, are you? And even if you do, then going into a really hard battle, you're at a massive disadvantage there.
Well, don't forget.
That's why the organization and the control of supplies overrules the needs of morality. Because remember, if you've got civilians there who've got food and water, morality would be that you request that they aid you.
Yeah, well, don't forget,
if you're going to steal, you don't steal all of it. You don't commandeer their whole supply and leave them with nothing. You take a little tiny bit.
Well, I just want to point out for people, because a lot of times they don't think like in these massive scales, right? But it's not just food and water, even though that's terrible. Like, I'm here to tell you, I know people very close who didn't have water in the middle of Iraq at times, but that's also your munitions. So like, if you don't have munitions, how do you even fight a battle? Because that's a supply. So it's,
interestingly enough, back in the Chinese, ancient Chinese culture, not only would they commandeer a whole family, all their farm and all their tools and money and food, they would commandeer their labor. So what they would say is, you need to make my arrows and you need to shine my armor. You need to look after my horses. If you don't, you answer to the commander and he will kill you. So part of that commandeering the supplies was physically enslaving the population, and the population knew better than to say no to this.
Of course. Yeah, they would take over farms, or they would take over whatever they could. And this is why Russia's never actually been invaded successfully, because they burn everything. So there is nothing for you to take, and the further in you go, there's nothing behind you. So yeah, for sure.
Well, I think we can pretty much know this is equal and opposite to this is equal to communism and opposite to the way that we do things. But this is pretty much exactly the same as the way the Islamic hijadis like to work. And I think that is, as we go through this book, going to let people know there is no such thing as a friendly hijadi. There's no such thing as a moderate hijadi. They just do not exist. And the reason that they're going to tell you that they do exist is because if you knew the details of what they had in store for you, you wouldn't have let them in the first place. But it's too late for that. So we need to understand they're here. This is happening. The hijab is at the door. It's happening in a couple of weeks' time. It's already happening in some places in the world. Just the news, for some reason, don't think we want to know. You know, for whatever reason, of course we don't want to hear about that. They're going to tell us about some other irrelevant nonsense, like what's happening in the sporting arenas, boxing, football, that kind of thing. It's definitely more relevant than this. Definitely more relevant than the movements of the Islamic armies. But anyway, we continue. So the last one, number 5. A general must pay attention to all 5 of these points, for they represent the difference between total victory and total defeat. Now, I don't need to go through those points again. We know heaven, earth, the generals having all those nice attributes that you must follow, marshalling of the army, controlling all the supplies of the surrounding area. And the last one is to follow the others. So we know a general must pay attention to all 5 of these. Once again, the soldier has no responsibility apart from to follow the commands. It's the general that has to pay attention to all these. Now, why do you think you are telling a soldier this? Why would you tell a soldier what the general's responsibility to you as a soldier is? Do you think that's so that the soldier can criticize the general for not doing these things?
Well, no, it's supposed. So the way this is written, the reason it tells you, because the way it's written in mine is really funny. But the reason it tells you is because the general is who you yield to. So the general is who needs to have mastered these things. You're the rock, sir. You just do what the commander says unequivocally. You know what I mean? Like you have a complete accord with him. He's the guy who's supposed to think, because you don't think. General thinks. You have complete accord, or you don't have a head. That's the bottom line, right? And so in my number 11, it says, these 5 heads should be familiar to every general. He who knows them will be victorious. He who knows them will not fail. So in other words, it's saying, okay, you who have complete accord, don't even worry. You're guaranteed victory as long as you have complete accord. And if you don't have a complete accord, well, you're going to have a real bad day. So that's what I.
And you know what is true? Like, even though I hate to admit it, because I totally disagree with this approach for war. If your plan is to sneak up behind someone after having tricked them into thinking that you're allies, that you're friends, that they have nothing to worry about, as long as you are fed and watered and you have a good position, as soon as they turn their back, you can kill them and they will have no chance. You are 100% going to win that. But it's at any cost. I don't agree with the cost of stabbing your friends in the back so that you can take control of their stuff, because God will punish you for that kind of conduct. Like, there's no 2 ways about it.
Yeah.
So when the general is having to pay attention to all 5 of these things, I think the reason the soldier is being told this is so that they know if the general does not have these 5 things, guess whose fault it is going to be? Yours. It's not going to be the general's fault. The reason he doesn't have these 5 things is because you soldiers weren't gaining these from the civilians, or you weren't looking after them properly. One of you didn't do your job properly, and that's the reason the general is now going to have to make an example of you and punish you in front of all the rest, like we saw with the favorite concubine being beheaded. Whoever's fault it is that the rest of you didn't correctly perform is now going to be punished. Corporal punishment is usually what happens. And then that means the next time this problem comes up, the soldiers will solve it before the general is told about it. That's why I think they're saying this. They're saying if there's any problem, since the general is following this, the soldiers must be at fault. And whichever one of you is most responsible for that fault needs to be removed so that the whole can strengthen. And this will be an example to the rest of you that if you spot this problem in future, don't think, oh, I'll hide it for the sake of the soldier. No, that could get you both killed. You bring it to the attention of the soldier and say, you better solve this now before I tell the general. And if they don't immediately solve it, in order that you keep your head, you're letting the general know this is the weak chain. This is the weak link here who isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, who's going to bring this army to ruin. So get rid of them, off of their head, and then the general will reward the rest of you. So it's making sure the soldiers know, although you have to rely on each other in battle, there's no friends.
Right.
Your only friend is the commander. Your only friend is victory through following the obedient commands of that commander. And if you think this guy over here is your friend, let's see how friendly you feel when he's getting your head cut off to save his own neck. That's what this is saying.
Yeah. I mean, when you say it like that, it does. I can see the picture you're presenting, which is if we fail, it means you weren't in complete accord. That's actually very interesting. And also the reason I say that is because it's a sign of terrible leaders. They're never wrong.
So I always say, right, these guys are terrible people, terrible leaders, terrible followers. They're terrible everything. But the reason why they can't see this is because they're not allowed.
Yeah.
Like if this was us, I was saying to you the other day or yesterday, I was saying if I was born there and I was brought up Islamic and it came to it, I don't think I would rather die than accept this stuff, because I know in here, not only is this horribly manipulative and psychotic, it is morally so corrupt. It actually, if I had done that, I would wish for death myself, not through martyrdom. I would wish to crawl up in a corner where no one could see me and die for the things that I had committed. Whereas these guys, they don't get to think about that. If they do that, they don't go to heaven and they're immoral. Their name will forever be stained. Whereas if they do this, it's the commander's order. I was just following orders. So they are exonerated from all the morality, the questioning. They don't have to think too hard. It's like, oh, that's a weight off my shoulder. I'm just doing what I'm told. I got an easy job. It's the commander that's got the tough job.
Yeah.
He's the one who's sending you to your death. He's the one that's got the hard job.
Yeah, it's crazy reading this from each perspective. Like since we're sitting here talking about it, again, the first time I read it, I was just a regular U.S. soldier. But here, thinking about both sides of like the thought processes. Yeah. Reading this is like, it's like a totally different book. I'm saying it's actually a testament to the genius of duplicitousness. Like I'm not even gonna lie, brother. It's like, wow.
Well, the thing is, if they'd written this honestly, nobody would follow it.
Well, that's the trick every time.
Most people, even though most people are generally ignorant until they find truth, most people are, until they actually read the truth of the Bible, they have no idea how to assess and discern truth. They don't know what they're doing in life, and it leads them to honest mistakes. This cannot be seen as an honest mistake unless it's written in this way. If it was upfront and honest, you might as well say to someone, right, I'm going to command you to do immoral, horrible things, including stabbing people in the back who you've promised to be allies and friends with. In order that you do that, I'm going to have you commandeer slaves from your own people and steal all their food and make them poor. Then at the end of the day, if you don't do it correctly, we're going to decide amongst us whose fault it was. It ain't going to be mine.
And it ain't going to be mine.
It ain't nobody would agree to this in their right mind. But the way that they style it out and write it makes you feel like, oh, this is such an honorable way to live. So that's why they mistakenly, in my view, believe this. And it's the same in the Islamic the Islamic hijab. They honestly believe that this is moral, this is from God, this is serving God, despite the fact they're actually serving this disgusting, despicable human being.
Yeah. And we know who the human being serves. No, I was just saying, we know who the human being serves. That's all right. Yeah. Go ahead.
So we get to the end of the page. So you must study this when laying your plans and thoroughly understand each point of relevance. By this, I mean you should fully consider, has your ruler a moral compass? Has your general ability to succeed? Which side is best favoured by the earth, climate and terrain? Where is the leadership most effective? Whose army is strongest? Whose officers and men are best trained? Who best understands the use of reward and the use of punishments? The answers to these questions will tell you who will succeed and who will be defeated as a leader. Now, this bit is stretching the truth of the original doctrine. The Chinese one does not say that at all.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't say the opposite, but it does. Like, this is all added stuff from Western perspective. So if we go through that, you must study these when laying out your plans and thoroughly understand their relevance. The reason they're saying that is, if you don't agree these things, if your morals are getting in the way at this early stage, you won't be effective in following these. So we're asking you, study the relevance of these, i.e. the stuff you think's relevant is going out the window. These are going to be your new morals. And by that, I mean, which ruler has a moral compass? Now, we know if you're not a good soldier, you lose your head and someone else is promoted into your spot. So that's what this is saying. Have you got it in you to follow this guy to the end of the earth, to accept his morals and commands more than the next guy? If you're the guy that can follow commands and you're not going to have any moral questions, you will be an effective moral compass. Which general has ability? Are you going to hesitate and think, oh, but my old God wouldn't have liked this, or I might not, you know, you're going to start thinking about philosophy at the time when you have to carry this out. If that's you, then dispense with that person. They are not going to have the ability to do what is required in the art of war. Which side is best favored by climate and terrain in the earth? So we know this is him saying, if you are one of these people who cannot be bothered to move your force, to be patient, to wait for that moment to strike, to have the knife in the back moment, then you are not a good leader. Whose army is strongest? Where is the leadership most effective? So this is saying, where is the leadership most effective? I.e., if this guy is like the lowest ranking soldier, but you think he's the one that follows your orders the best, perhaps you should promote him right to the top. If your top guy is lazy and isn't following your command, who thinks he's better than you, who has a god which is not you, maybe he should be demoted to the bottom rank. So this is the underlying thing is reorder your army in terms of obedience to the leader. Now, what is very impressive about this to me is how exactly it follows Quran doctrine. Despite this being a much older book than the Quran, the Quran says you are in order of obedience to Allah. That's how he values your life. The most obedient person is the most important person and the most valued. And even wives, if you have 9 wives, how do you order your wives? Allah says the one who's most obedient to you is the most valuable one. She should be your head wife. Oh, and that's what this means. Okay. Sorry, you looking, sir?
No. I'm sorry. No. I was just, I didn't know that about the Quran. I was saying, oh, wow. I didn't know it was like who's your most obedient wife. I had never heard that before.
Yeah, it's in, I think it's Al Imran. It's either Al Imran or it's Al Nisa. It's one of those. It might even be in both. But the way that Allah says you should assess your wives, because obviously in Quran worship, you don't take a wife because you're in love with a woman.
Right.
You're going to have this you're not going to have this fairy tale family and kids, 2.4 kids and a picket fence. No, that's not why you're having wives. You're taking wives so that you can mass produce children to send to kill Jews. They're going to go and martyr themselves because you're now too old to be able to do it. You know, you failed. So you're going to become a preacher so you can still get to heaven through the back door. And you're going to be sending your sons off to the jihad. So you need lots of wives to have lots of sons because they all are going to get martyred. They're not going to be coming back to you with medals and success stories. Success story for you is that your sons all died martyred to Jew killing, you know, to the Islamic Jihad. So that's what this is talking about. And then when it says which army is strongest, well, it's not talking about physical strength because that doesn't really matter. Which army is most likely to continually stab in the back and not be detected? That's really what they're saying here. Which army is more likely to succeed in the plan of doing this, stabbing in the back, not having any questions or complaints about their leader, and which has the most effective chain of command, you know, who aren't going to get their heads cut off for not doing what they're told. So really, I think what they should have said there is which army is the most obedient. And then it says, who best understands the use of reward and punishment? So that's kind of what we went through before, that if you're disobedient, your disobedience will spread throughout the ranks. It will be known that this is a weak leader because he doesn't punish disobedience. Whereas if you chop the head off your king's favorite concubine because she got one simple command wrong and you asked her again, she got it wrong again, you didn't even waste a second. You literally ran up to her and just sliced her head off in front of everyone. Guess what? Nobody else is going to do that in future. So that's what this is saying. He who best understands the use of punishment, i.e. cutting people's heads off for being disobedient, and reward, promoting those who are obedient, that's a reward they're talking about, those guys will preside over the strongest effective army who will get that knife plunging in the back moment and they will win their fights. Thusly, we know that is the art of war. It's the art of cowardice. It's the art of immorality.
What's crazy
at any cost.
Yeah, one of the tidbits I learned, and it's been a while, but I remember learning of how we've come to have ribbons on our uniform. That's the little things that represent medals and all that, right? I've never shown my uniform.
Oh, your colors. Right? It's like instead of having a medal, you have a little strip with a.
Yeah, right. It's called the ribbon, right? Yeah. So, but it represents like a medal or an award, right? And that origin of that, I think people should look it up because it's about rewards and what people motivated people to do even more extraordinary things. It's really, like I said, the things are really interesting when you look at that. And that to me is like one of the most interesting of the things written there, because in which army is there greater constancy both in reward and punishment, which I think is like which army can manipulate its troops better. That was really like it's just like of all the ones that we went through, I was just like that really just kind of jumped out to me. It's a very starkly written thing. Like, yo, which leader can do the best manipulation? That's the dude I need him to. It's like, wow.
And not only that, you're growing new, more manipulative guys every day. So it's like today, you might be the most greatest manipulator in the army, but you've got soldiers under you who are training to be just like you. One of them might excel over you. And then as soon as you make a mistake, you're off with your head gone. That guy's going to take your place. Now he's in control of the army. And they've seen 2 or 3 times people get their head cut off who were good leaders so they could be succeeded by a new leader. And it breeds this attitude of we are the strongest, best, most effective, most moral unit on earth. We are the soldiers of our God, who is the commander. We will never be defeated. And the reason is, and they know this, because we are willing to accept any cost. We are willing to go to any platitude. We are willing to do anything, whatever it takes to beat those guys over there who in the Islamic hijab is the Jews and Christians. And they are not.
Well, look,
so in their head, they know we will beat these guys eventually. We just need to wait. Thus, the control of supplies.
Well, as I always, we're on stream, so I love to talk about like things that kind of depict this for people to kind of have a witness. So I don't know. I'm a bit of a movie watcher. I don't get as much time as I used to, just like I don't get as much time for video games. But I am a big movie watcher, and as you know, one of my favorite hobbies is long range shooting. So there's a great movie about a sniper called Enemy at the Gates. Don't know if you've ever seen this movie. Very popular.
Is it the one with the tower? The guy gets trapped at the top of a tower. Is that the one?
No, I don't think so. This is one. It's Russia. It's Russia and Germany for the Battle of Stalingrad. And this is where Vasily Zaitsev like makes his name or whatever. But here's the point. So anyway, Vasily Zaitsev like does some like super heroic thing, takes out like 3 high-ranking German dudes, right, and saves this PR guy. I forget what his actual title is, but you know what I'm saying, PR guy for the military. So he's a military soldier as well. And so they have this guy in his room, and it's all the PR dudes. And so they're like, the guy is mad because he's like, our soldiers are defecating on themselves. They're not fighting. What is going on? Rah, rah. We need ideas. And so like, they're all super scared. They're all like, I think you should take out the commanders who fail. I think you should eliminate chief of staff. And then one guy is like, give them hope. But the point is, right, so like, who was the best at this manipulation? And so he has a new idea because the current one isn't working. It's so great. I'm so mad I don't have a clip because I didn't even know we are going to come across this, but it is like one of my favorite scenes because it was like, oh,
and you know what? I think I have seen that film. It just was so long ago.
I
have to watch it to know. And the thing I'm talking about with the tower is actually a piece out of another film called Inglorious Bastards.
Seen that one? Yeah,
that thing. I don't know why I thought it was that same film, but the bit at the tower is in a film they watch where the guy is trapped at the top of the tower and he kills tons of dudes from his sniper position. Then he dies in real life at the end of that film.
Yeah, this is
totally unrelated thing.
Yeah, no, it's Jude Law, but definitely check it out.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll put a link underneath with all the films we've mentioned so you can check them out. But I think it's interesting to think about that in terms of the way that we understand war in the West is through hope and motivation. You don't motivate your troops with a whip. Like sometimes you have to be mean to be kind. And sometimes you're going to have to shout at someone and drag them through the mud because it's not an easy life. It's a tough life being a soldier. But there's never going to be the fear of being put to death because you didn't follow a specific command. And you're not going to be looking to take out the rest of your squad so you can take their meal, that you can have their lunch and take their position in the squad. It's just not something we really that often will come across. But these guys, these Islamic hijabis, that is exactly what they do. And we know that because you will never, ever find a video on any platform of a successful hijabi commander who came back to tell the story. They just don't. The reason why they don't come back is because success is metered in martyrdom. So they're not coming back to tell that story. If they come back to tell the story, they are cowards and they're not going to heaven. They were insubordinate. They didn't do what they were asked to do. And that means they are horrible, sinful, evil people who aren't ever going to get to Allah. So keep that in mind when you're thinking, oh, but they're just friendly, moderate guys. We just don't understand their culture. It's really racist to say these things. It's like, no, it's not racist to say these things. This is what they believe. And the reason they're lying about it is so that they can get the drop on you, because their commander has physically told them, if you don't do this, you are evil and sinful and you won't go to heaven, and I will probably end up having to kill you myself. So get on your knees and do what I'm asking you to do and kill those Jews and Christians over there. Stab them in the back. Do it as soon as you can. That's why the propaganda campaign tells you, oh, Jews are evil, Christians are evil, Christian extremists are everywhere. Saudi Arabia is destroyed from the Christian extremists. When have we ever seen a Christian extremist? Honestly, like, has anyone ever in the whole history of life ever even seen one time a Christian extremist who went to an Arab country and killed someone? Like, when has that ever happened? But if you ask anyone who lives in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Syria, who is loyal to these guys, that is what they think happens, because they're shown propaganda films and they're read books that suggest to them all the problems in the world are caused by Jews and their pet Christians who do all the killing for them. So the Jews are like the evil guys with the big long noses, sat around a big pile of gold, wishing death on everybody, eating babies. That's what they think. And the guys going out doing their orders, killing everyone, making all the wars, is Christians. So when they are then faced with this on top of that, the two levels of brainwashing make them think this is moral and righteous. Even though I'm stabbing guys in the back after saying I'm friends with them, it's moral and righteous because these guys are demons. That's what they think. So we then need to take that into account when they're saying, you're racist, you Christian and Jew people, you Western white people, you're all evil. They're going to say that. They're going to say that, and they won't feel bad about it. And the reason is this. And Islamic hijab culture, which is basically the same as this, flavored with Allah.
Yeah, it's like I said,
that's just page 2, 3. Yeah, 2.
Yeah, reading this and seeing like the or interpreting it from the other side's perspective, I definitely can see like where you're going. Like, it's really wild because when I like we talk about, and this, you know, not to belabor the point, but just when I read this, none of this would have entered my mind because we have a different moral compass. Like, it's totally different. And now thinking about it in terms of that, it's crazy.
When I first read this, I was an atheist and it didn't make any sense to me. I thought, well, this kind of sounds very idealistic, but it's very generic. You know, it's full of these words, honor and moral and everything else, and they're not very well defined. So I thought, this is basically like poetry, isn't it? It's just meant to motivate you. Like, whatever your view is, you'll do it better once you've read this. Then the second time I read it as a Christian, and I was horrified. And I thought, oh, I can see what they've done here. They've reverse engineered Christ's approach to love. That's what this is. This is a reverse engineering of the way Christ tells Christians and soldiers of Christ to act. And it takes into consideration the fact that if someone says, I want to be your friend, you immediately have to consider that that's true. If someone says, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, you have to accept that. And you have to consider that they're true. Then you have to turn your back on them. So these guys know all they need to do to get the drop on you is to come to you as a friend and say, I believe in Jesus. When your back's turned, kill you. Then they've done the moral act of killing a demon Christian for their commander, and they will then be glorified as long as they get martyred at the end of it, which is the likely outcome if you're a hijabi. So I almost feel like with the Christian Bible and the New Testament and the Old Testament in mind, this was written. So it is like the Quran. Yeah, it is just like the Quran. It rips off a previous book, but it corrupts it so badly that it almost comes out with the opposite answer.
Yeah, but it's so stealthily corrupted. If you read it with the right intention, it doesn't come off as wrongly intended. That's what I'm saying. That's what it's. I hate to say it, but it's kind of genius. I hate to say
it is. It's absolutely the most devious thing I've ever come across in my life.
Yeah,
it's the greatest scheme ever.
Yeah,
and in fact, if I hold you up the book. Can you see that? Yeah, notice on this side is the English, but on this side is the Chinese. Yeah, show you. There you go. So on one side you got Chinese, one side you got English. And you think in your head, this must equal this then. No. If you translate this Chinese stuff into the actual real Chinese that they wrote this from, this does not equal this. It's not even close. When you read one and the other, you might as well be reading two completely separate books. So
that sounds familiar. That sounds really familiar. I heard there's other book where if I compare the original language to English, I'd be reading a different book. It starts with like a Q or a K, depending on how you spell it. I don't know. That just jumped out to me. I don't know where that came from.
Definitely not talking about Quran. So the point I'm trying to make to you is, and this is exactly like the Quran. If you are this guy and you're reading this and you want the Chinese version, you want the communist version to be the moral version, after reading this, which is metaphorical, you're going to make it good in your head. You're going to give excuses to the guys who wrote this, and you're going to accept that these guys must be bad because these guys are telling you so. But if you are Western, you are reading this side, you're going to think, oh, if I follow this, I will be being moral. So it liquefies the idea of morality down into your obedience to this text. And that is the whole idea, is that you are not important. You are just an ant, and the hive leader is the one who is giving you the command. And if you so much as drop a single letter or a command, not only will you bring down the whole army, you will be killed, you will not go to heaven, and you will be known as immoral for the rest of time. Your name will be ruined.
Yeah.
The crap.
Must have been a typo.
That needs to be a hip hop band. Someone please out there. The crap. Give me some craps to listen to. So anyway, we carry on. So successful war follows the path of deception. Now, where else have we heard a similar doctrine to this? Well, we know Allah is the master deceiver. That's how he describes himself. The master schemer, the deceiver of deceivers. That's exactly what he says word for word. So we know successful war follows the path of deception. So you're following the path of Allah, who we know as Satan, in order to be successful in war. And this is, I think this is genius. This is why I successfully was able to predict that the jihad against Israel, the war against the children of God, would be happening in the winter, because these guys are very non-spiritual about this. You know, they think in terms of, right, when's the best chance for me to win? What is the best condition for me to win? When is the best season for me to attack to give me the best chance for the best condition to win? Not the winter. So Allah or Satan goes, okay, so I won't attack in the winter. God says, I will attack in the winter. So that's how I knew it was going to be September, October, because I read the Bible and I used my head and I read this, and it just made so much sense to me. If God wants to defeat Satan while embarrassing him and making all his troops wish they'd not listen to him, the start of the winter is the time to start your attack. So that's why they attacked last year and thought it was going to be over by now. God is now making Israel move forward at the start of the winter in counterattack. And I think that says to me, there is providence in that. We know the jihad is going to be defeated. We don't know, but I think I know the jihad is going to be defeated, or the hijab, sorry. We definitely didn't mention jihad. Sorry, YouTube. Don't demonetize me. Oh, yeah, that's right. You don't monetize me anyway. So screw you, YouTube, you absolute comment moderating Nazis, you absolute lunatics who seem to think that it's okay for these hijadis to say whatever they want, racist, nasty comments. But you want to stop me from saying simple, polite thank yous to my commenters.
Yeah, I'm a fan of your prophecy series, so I can't let you get banned into the shadows, if you know what I'm trying to say. So
no, you're right. It's a good habit to get into, not saying these trigger words, which the algorithm will obviously pick up on.
Yeah. I need, as a person who doesn't do prophecy like you do, I got to make sure when your videos go live, I can see them.
Yeah.
Because, when you told us the last time you were banned into the shadows, and with my feed, I was like, where's Daily Court? Did he go on vacation?
Brother, it's terrible. Virtually all my videos get reported down into the ground, and then weeks later they come back up, and I think, why is that doing well now? And it's like, well, no one knew it existed until now. That's why.
Exactly.
So anyway, we carry on. Success in war follows the path of deception, i.e. Allah, who is Satan. Thus, when you are able to act, feign incapacity. So it's telling you, when you are ready to act, when you are going to stab the back of your enemy, make it seem like you're not ready. Like, I've noticed animals do this. Like, when a dog wants to steal some food off your plate, he won't stand there and look at your plate intently. He'll be looking the other way and his eye will be on the plate. Like, have you ever seen a dog do that? When he wants to nick chips or a burger off your plate and you've shooed him away, he knows you're not going to willingly let him do it. He'll turn away. And what he's saying to you with his body language is, I'm not watching your food anymore. And he's waiting for you to turn your back so he can pounce and get
pounce right on it.
That's what this is saying. When you are able to act, don't let them know that you're able to act, because they'll then expect that you're going to act. Feign incapacity, you know, oh, I'm too tired or lonely or sad or I'm not ready, you know, make it seem like you can't act, and they'll go, I better turn my back now then. See? The path of deception. So when deploying, feign inactivity. When you are close, appear to be far off. When you are distant, you want to appear close. When your enemy seeks an advantage, lure him further, and if he is in disorder, that is the time to crush him. So what this is describing is tricking your opponent out of their position, which assumes they were in position to begin with. So even though you're following the path of deception and they're not, we don't know what path they're following, they had order before you turned up. So you're following the path of deception and chaos. They're following the path of order and truth, the opposite path that you are. And that's the reason why you are so sure that you're going to win. You're using their truth and order as a weapon to use against them, but you're having to sell your soul in order to do that. Thusly, that is why it's called following the path of deception. Now you know why they made morals and heaven the first point 1 and 2, and it was even more important than the terrain, the commander. Everything else was secondly to moral compass and heaven. But we've forgotten that now. We're saying we're following the path of deception. We're deploying fakeness. We're feigning inactivity. We're looking at the food out the corner of our eye so that when the guy turns his back, we can get that burger and chips for ourselves as a dog. And we are saying if he is in disorder, you know, if he's hurt himself or he's asleep or he's not waiting, you know, he's confused about what he's doing, then that's the time to pounce and get that knife in his back.
Just a quick question, right quick, if I can interject. So here's what I think is funny, because I love, you know, me and old HHS loving questions. If all warfare, because my translation says all warfare is based on deception, does that mean I'm being deceived too? I just want to highlight that right quick. It's just I just love reading stuff. And
you know, I kind of agree with this. Warfare is based on deception. Even if you're stood in front of someone with your fists up and you're fighting them, you might throw a feint. You might move your feet to let them think you're going to go this way and then go this way. Or there's tons of things you can do that's like minimal amounts of deceit. And the reason is because if someone's expecting you to throw a punch at them and they know exactly where it's going to land, they're going to block it. So you won't be able to land that punch. So that's why deception is such an important piece of war. But all the same, if you're a Christian, you have to give someone fair warning that you're going to attack them. You have to give them a chance to move their civilians out of the way, even though that means you're giving them fair warning. They're not going to be caught unawares if you do that. It's the right thing to do.
No. I think you're missing what I'm saying. What I'm saying is in a warfare, okay, not in a basic one-on-one engagement. You're absolutely right. Of course, I'm not trying to just telegraph everything I'm doing. But hear what I'm trying to say. Because remember, the commanders who has the morals. So what I mean is when it says all warfare is based on deception, does that mean the commander is allowed to deceive me too? He's my commander.
I think that perfectly sums up this whole book and in fact the Quran of the Muslims, because the first thing they tell you is this is moral. This is going to get you to heaven.
Right.
Then the rest of the book is telling you how you're absolutely not doing anything immoral and you're probably not going to get to heaven. Right. Because they planted the seed as the first word being moral, you just accepted, okay, everything's going to be moral. Let's be obedient now, because that was the next thing I got told. I have to be obedient or I'm not moral. I'm not going to heaven. But being obedient is doing all this stuff and following the path of deception. So it's like, well, if I'm following the path of deception, you told me my commander is moral and sincere.
There you go.
That was deception. You know, look, how can I trust anything? What do I know what's true? I better just do what I'm told.
There you go. And now
it's the opposite of this.
And even if you were deceived that you did something, well, it's okay. All warfare is based on deception. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. and they've got the ultimate cop out. If they ever get caught doing something untoward, they got their hand in the cookie jar of someone's food or money or whatever, they need it for the war. They can say, well, I was just following orders. This guy told me to do it. And if I don't do it, I'm dead. So of course I got the ultimate cop out. Yeah. And I think in their head, they think they must think, well, if I'm wrong, if Jesus is actually the Lord, when I'm in front of Jesus having to explain my actions, I can say not only was I following orders, which I thought was moral and good, he was threatening to cut my head off if I didn't. I didn't want to have my head cut off. I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
Yeah.
Because they're so ingrained in this deceptive mind frame that if you deny everything, if you hide your real values, if you hide your real intentions, you can always get away with it through lying. But they don't realize the reason why Jesus Christ is the truth, the way and the light. Like truth is the first thing he is before the way and the light. He is the truth because he is not able to be conned in that way. Like you can't give him an excuse and say, oh, this guy was telling me to do it and I was scared he was going to kill me. I'm not going to accept that. And you would know that had you read. So I'm going to stop tapping it.
You read actual
Someone told me the other day I have a horrible tapping.
Oh man, it came
terrible.
through. The quick stories for y'all. So I was watching Brother Daily Corbett's video, but I wasn't in one of my normal locations. I was in my living room because I was doing some cleaning and some dishes and so forth. So I had to, in the living room, I have we'll just call it a nicer sound system. And I had it turned up pretty style so I could hear him very clearly while I was like, the water's running and all that. And all of a sudden, he tapped the Bible like 4 times, and I looked around my house to see what was going on. I was like, what the? And then I said, it finally clicked. I said, wait a minute. Was that Corbett? Let me back up. And then I backed it up, and sure enough, I can see him.
It's like, is someone banging trash cans together out there or something? No, it's tapping my finger on the Bible really loudly. I'll try not to do it in future. And by the way, audience, whoever's watching, if there is anything annoying in my videos, visually or audibly, please let me know in the comments, because I would never have figured that out on my own, that my Bible tapping was akin to someone punching the door with a police truncheon.
Exactly. When you got the sound up, it was, for sure.
And you know what? I should know better because I have got a really powerful sound system and it's always at like 90% volume. I don't put it to 100% because I have more respect for the hearing levels of my neighbors. I don't deafen them. But I do enjoy sharing my music with them. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, mine is normally... I let's just say it can get loud, but I normally keep it.
Humble will have better
15.
speakers than you and me. Like he's not going to brag about it. This guy, when you put an idea in his head, he doesn't only go out and get the best one; he gets the best of the best one. I got my new computer. I had my computer hacked by some random hijadis, destroyed it, couldn't use it anymore. So I immediately went out and bought a new one, and I was like, right, I've got quite a high budget. I'm going to go for the top spec everything. And I nearly did, but I just couldn't justify spending what it would have cost to get the full thing. So I went down 2 tiers of graphics card. I went down 1 tier of.
Well, one reason wasn't your fault though, because they broke your original order one. So you. Yeah,
but still, I didn't. It wasn't a 4090 that I was looking at. It was a 4080 Ti. So I wasn't aiming for the very top.
Mm-hmm.
Humble goes out and gets himself a new computer and goes, oh, look, I got a photo. They finally give me the photo of my computer that's going to arrive. Shows me the photo. I'm like, it's literally all RGB and fans and memory and 4090. That's all. My eyes are looking past the rest of it. I can just see 4090 and like 50 million fans with RGB going around. And I was like, God damn.
Yeah.
I'm happy with my rig, but I know everyone else for about 5 minutes, I had the best computer. But that was a short 5 minutes.
Look, when I'm trying to render, because I was working on an old 2-core i7, and I remember talking to you.
You absolutely
I remember talking to you, and I was like,
years.
I'm going to render 4K. I'm going to go play some video games while I wait. Now it's like,
incidentally, right? This is unrelated to the topic. Anyone who is looking to upgrade their computer so that they can render videos, do YouTube work, get AMD if you can. NVIDIA's good, but the software for capturing screen or rendering videos down, unless you get the 4090, everything below that, the drivers they're okay. You have to fiddle with them to get them to work. Like I'm using a custom driver and I have to run a piece of software in the background that tricks NVIDIA into thinking it's a legitimate signed driver. If I don't do that, I get milky white videos. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's not a hardware problem because it only affects rendered videos. Like when I'm making them, I can't see it like that. So it's definitely a driver problem. For me to defeat that, I had to fiddle for like a week. It was very frustrating. Waste of time.
We were talking about it too.
AMD card. If you're doing it if you're playing games, no, get NVIDIA. But if you're rendering videos only, get AMD.
Yeah, I remember us talking about it, and I was like, "Are you sure it's a problem?" And remember, I went searching, and I was like, "Oh my god, it actually is a problem." Like I didn't believe this. Like,
you know what? It was making me pull what small amount of hair I have out because I just could not figure it out. When I was actually doing the work, it was fine. It looked perfect. When I'm playing games, perfect. Everything else looks perfect. I render down the file, then I play the file, and I'm like, why does it look like I've got like glaucoma? It looks like I got cataract.
yeah, no, it's true. It looked like you were on the beach. Like it was so much light. I was like, where?
Or when you're really drunk and you've got like glazed eyes, and then you go from a dark room into a really light room, and everything's like glary. It was like that, and I just thought, why? I spent ages correcting the levels. The driver was doing that on purpose so that I could then think, I wish I'd bought a 4090. But they needn't have bothered, because I do wish I'd bought a 4090. Anyway,
Right.
like this, why would, if I had the money, I definitely would have. But anyway, we'll go back to the subject at hand. So next on the list, oh, you'll like this bit. So the rest of that sentence is, when your enemy seeks an advantage, lure him further. If he's in disorder, you crush him. If he's organized, then be ready for him to crush you. When he's strong, avoid his attack. When he is angry, goad him further. Now, this is something our lovely Muslim buddies are great at doing. In fact, Catholics like to do this as well. They know to be a Christian requires a peaceful soul. If you lose your temper and you say things in anger or spite, if you do anything in the wrong spirit, you are not effectively doing what Christ has tasked you with. But you're a human. Of course, you're going to lose your temper now and again. That's why, you know, God is forgiving of you if you pray and you say you're sorry. But these guys know the angrier they can make you, the less effective your Christianity is. If they can cause you to lose your mind completely by goading you, by provoking you, the thing that you do, they can then make an example of and go, see, I told you Christians were bad. Yeah. That's exactly what they're doing. So that's why it says here, when he's angry, goad him further, because they know you're making good decisions before you get angry. Not after, though. When you get angry, you're not making good decisions. When you've completely lost it, your decision making's shot. You're making poor decisions, and they will use that to maneuver you into a weak spot so they can stab you in the back and kill you. That's what the art of war is. Yeah. So we carry on. If he is humble, be overbearing. So that means if you approach them in a nice Christian spirit, they're going to try and be overbearing in order to goad you into anger. So if you approach them with humility, they are going to see that. That's why I know this is reverse engineered from this one, the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Because they know to do that. They know you're going to approach them in a spirit of kindness and love and humility. You're going to try your best to be a good Christian. Even though they're your enemy, they have no respect for you and they want to kill you. You're going to try and reach them with the truth of this, because you know this is the only thing that is more powerful than this. Mm-hmm. And the way we know that is this, the ultimate punishment you're going to get and the ultimate reward, they are both death. There is nothing past death in this. Because remember, the second most important thing is heaven. How is it you're getting to heaven? You're martyring yourself in a war against innocence after having robbed your civilians and eaten all their food. You're not really going to heaven. They're just using that as a deception to make you obey the commander. Mm-hmm. So whether you die in battle as a martyr or whether you die from your commander cutting off your head for not following his orders, neither one of those is getting you to heaven. But if you can convince someone using this, even if they die, if they ignore this and follow this one, they can indeed get forgiven for their sins because they didn't know any better. And now they know better. Doing this will get them to heaven. Mm-hmm. They will know this is stronger than this.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to point out, too, is you went over a couple tactics there, or a couple of things we could build off of. So one is don't be goaded, right? And what, you know, we can go to James 1:19, right? Let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. There's reason we always want to be of sound mind.
Anyone who wants to know about why you shouldn't be rude, even when it's your enemies, read the entire letters of James and the Gospel of James, specifically the bit that describes the tongue as a fire. I love that analogy where your tongue is a fire, because what happens is when you hit people with it, you inflame them, you inflame their rage, and then the icy wind of Satan will blow those flames back towards you. So you'll upset the person and enrage them. They will take that rage out on you, and you will probably be enraged. So you started the fire, then it spread back to you. Now you're both aflame. And that's James. Well, anyway, read James's Gospel for the ins and outs. That. Thanks for that, humble servant.
No worries. Also,
Bible verse.
You know, I got to get that word in. You know how I do. And but the other thing you pointed out, which is something that they do all the time, we see this in debates, even the most recent one, is no matter how it is, they provide that bravado. I can't exact quote in your text, but it's like, oh, well, if they're being humble or meek, you just go get brash and bravado. That's what happens in.
It says, if he is humble, then you be overbearing.
There you go. And that's what happened. Like, we go to debate. We just literally, it's priceless, the timing of this, because we just saw Dr. William Lane Craig and Momo Hijab, and he's very nice. And what is Momo Hijab trying his best to do? Be overbearing. So I'm going to tell you, it's amazing lessons to be gleaned from these things.
When when it comes to arguing with these jihadi guys, or arguing with any kind of hijadis, sorry, yeah, not when it comes to arguing with these guys, the reason I find it so a simple task really to face them and beat them is because they're so bloody predictable. Like, they're not allowed to do anything outside of this, or if they're reading it from the Quran, the Allah flavored version, then they're doing the Quran. Jesus is he's good enough to give us free will. So even though he's given us guidance, and if we follow it, that will be the best thing to do. Like, if we follow his guidance using our free will, everything we do will be of maximum potential.
Well, that is the thing to do. It's not just a thing to do. If you're wise, it is the thing to do. Disobedience to God is littered it's littered throughout the Bible. It's shown so clearly as the not thing to do. I just want to articulate. Don't be disobedient.
But I think the difference between the two approaches is being obedient to Jesus and the words in this Bible is you choosing it. You're not doing it because he's threatening to cut your head off. You're not doing it because you want to go and be a martyr and you want to get a tent full of virgins. You're not doing it for any earthly reward. You're doing it because you love your Lord, and you recognize the reason you love your Lord is because he's so great.
Yeah, look,
because you got told to think he's great. You're not extolling his virtues to the enemy to convince the enemy he's great. You used your free will to choose that path, and you're willing to live and die by it. Whereas this is the fake version of that, whereas you are willing to live and die by your commander, but it's because he will cut your head off if you don't, and you have to tell others, even when you don't truly believe it, that you do, because it's the deceptive way.
And I just wanted to highlight, so the great thing about God, I use this as a testament to his love all the time, is that he gave you free will, which is technically he's giving you more than quote unquote he has in a very minimal sense of he can't go against.
That's absolutely true, 100% true, because there's things I can do with my free will that Jesus can't do.
Yeah, right. Like, there's things God
if I
can't
want
do.
To, I can be a thief, I can be a murderer, I can be any of these bad sinful things, and I can spend the rest of my life until I die doing sins. Jesus will not do that. He has not got freedom to do that. His heart will not let him do that. Whereas I have human free will. I can choose to throw I can throw my Bible in the bin and do the exact opposite and be a Muslim if I choose to.
Right.
The deciding factor of why I won't do that, now that I've recognized the truth in this book and the truth of Jesus, I've prayed on it, and I've been doing it for a while. I would rather die today having done this than live for 80 years, be rich, and die as a rich Muslim, because I know at the end of that 80 years, I will be held to account by this guy, and he's fair.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, but what good?
Fair. So whatever I do bad, immoral, or whatever punishments I lay on other people that I'm not allowed to do or that are not warranted, even if I live for 80 years and I'm a millionaire, like the richest Muslim ever, I have like 1 million wives. After that, I'm going to be punished very severely, and then I'll be destroyed. And that is worse than anything that you can have in life. But if I follow this, it doesn't matter what happens to me in my life, because what I'm going to get as a reward afterwards is greater than everything that you're going to get in life. In fact, life is almost like a training module to prepare you for what you're going to get as reward when you receive salvation and grace from Christ after you die. So it's totally worth it. Whereas I think with Muslims, they think dying in a hijab, as a martyr, the only reason they think it's worth it is because they think they're going to get 72 sexy white chicks. Like, that's how it's right. Their virginal brides have light skin. They're Western. They're blonde. Got blue eyes. Like,
well, I just want to point out, right, when you're using the biblical text, which is really good, to your point, right? What good is it to gain the whole world and lose your own soul? What good is that? It doesn't serve any. It's not a win. Like you said, when you get to that judgment, right, you'll be like, I wish I would have, maybe focused on something that matters, so I could be reunited with Christ, right? That's one thing. But when you read the other book, and all I have is the typoed version, so I'll put the typoed version on the screen. That's all I have. But when you read the other book, you are a slave, and that's it. There is no love that exists prior your servitude, which is a testament to the difference between them.
Mhm.
So I definitely think I just wanted to cover both those points.
But you know what I find really off-putting about the whole Quran bit and the whole Islam bit is, even though these people are slaves, after you've been a slave for a while, you're considered to be a good slave. You know, you're obedient in your slavery, and it's an easy life at that point because you have exactly what you have to do laid out before you. There's no decision making for you. There's no moral quandary. There's no guilt for you. The only thing that's ever going to make you feel guilty is being a bad slave at that point. So when you get into an argument with someone and they present you a difficult moral case, if you're a Christian, this will trouble you. You'll really have to think hard about this, and you'll stay up all night and all day the next day, and you won't be able to sleep until you've resolved it. You'll be praying, reading the Bible. You'll be trying to get it right, because morality is very important to you as a Christian.
Yes, yeah. This is why war is a very traumatic thing for many people, because if it's unjust in a sense, it will actually levy a great impact on people emotionally. So you see, I mean, I have many stories, but for sure, like, it'll definitely weigh on you.
Well, I think by the time you've committed to being a soldier and you're off fighting a war, you accept that God has given you extra responsibility because you are in command of people's lives, your own, your brothers, and the enemy. Like, you get to say whether people live or die in that moment. And that's a responsibility that God has granted you. So if you misuse that, you will be punished way more severely than someone who accidentally kills someone or someone who just is completely ignorant of it. At the point when you're making those decisions, it's a heavy moral weight on you. You know, you probably carry it around for years afterwards, even if you did the perfect thing. Even if you got every decision right, you're still going to wonder, well, maybe I didn't. Or like some people come back from war, and the thing that freaks them out is that they survived, even if they did everything right. It's like, how come I got to survive?
Survivor guilt is what we call it.
Yeah, they think like it's not fair on everyone who dies. Why did I get to come back to
my friends die? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Whereas if you're in the Islamic hijab, if you come back, that's when you get guilt because you haven't done what you were asked.
Right.
The Islamic hijab tells you martyrdom is the way to get to paradise. It's the same in here. If you don't die as a martyr, you basically were a crap soldier, you know, rubbish.
Right.
You didn't try hard enough. You know, get back out there.
Yeah, no, and that's
back out there.
Yeah, go back now. No, that's such a good point. I mean, because survivor guilt is a very real thing. Like, I mean, I've seen people who have had to deal with it and so forth. And like you said, right, for them coming back is like, that I must have failed, and it's like, that's so crazy to me.
Yeah.
That they're. That's what makes me also sad about their book, is that life is a gift from God, right? And they're told, as a slave, no less, to go throw away the gift. It's like, you're a slave, throw away.
Not only throw it away, but take it off other people and throw their gift away.
Yeah,
and that is the way you're going to get to paradise, so that you can enjoy the company of a bunch of virgins in a tent. I mean, it's
right, and it's very earthly.
For me, this is the other thing that annoys me about the whole paradise quandary. If you're Islamic, you can actually get that in life. I'm not saying it's a good thing or it's going to be something that you will actually want, but if you want, you can arrange a tent in your back garden and you can fill it with prostitutes, or they could be people from your local area. You know, you can physically set that up. There's nothing stopping you from setting that scenario up in life and enjoying fake paradise in your back garden. So why would you need to go and kill yourself to get that in heaven forever? Like, surely after a few weeks of enjoying these virginal Western brides, you're going to be scratching your head thinking, these bitches don't do anything. Like, they don't talk. What's the point? Like, they just disappear once you've had sex with them. How is that paradise? Like, what is the point in life just for that? Here's
my quick question. And this is a very serious question. I don't normally go solo myself, but the question is, are you describing a heavenly Diddy party? That's all I'm trying to understand. I should say heavenly, a paradise Diddy party. Because I just from what I've learned, especially as of late, that's what it sounds like you're describing. I mean, I just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there. That's what I'm saying.
Did he think it through, or did he not? That's the real question.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
No, I honestly, like, I mean, I wouldn't say this outwardly, because even though it's what I think, saying the words is so disrespectful, even though it's against Islam, who I detest. I just can't bring myself to say it on stream. But the thing that I'm trying to get you to think about, oh audience member, is what kind of a mind would conceive that dying in a war after having stolen from and then murdered innocents is going to get you to heaven? And why would that heaven be through the door of great honor a tent full of prostitute virgins who you use once and they disappear and a new one spawns out of thin air. Like, if that is the ultimate prize for the person who created that religion, what does it say about them? Like, even if you don't believe it, think about Jesus and what he offers you in salvation, grace, and heaven, the eternal kingdom. Then think about the way you have to live in order to achieve that, even if you don't believe it. Like, when I was an atheist, I used to think the same about Jesus. I didn't believe in him, but I knew if you gave me the choice, do you want to meet Allah or do you want to meet Jesus Christ on the train and have a friendship with them? It's not going to be Allah, it's going to be Jesus. I've got so many questions that I would want to ask Jesus, even when I was an atheist. And I would have a large amount of respect for this man, despite the fact that I didn't actually believe in him. Parable Jesus was strong enough of an icon for me as an atheist to want to follow. Even as an atheist, I wanted to follow this guy.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's
but
crazy.
I knew Allah wasn't a guy I wanted to be like. I detest the idea of Allah. I thought if I ever meet someone like this, I'm going to hate this guy.
It's funny when you ask people who, you know, one of those questions, like if you could have dinner with anyone in history, and obviously, and you could effectively communicate, who would you want to have dinner with? You know, one of the most common answers is Jesus Christ. Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ.
Well, not simply because he's a cool dinner guest, but you don't have to pay for the meal. It's going to be constant forever food. Whatever food you want, it's just going to keep on coming, isn't it? It's a forever dinner.
That's when you hit him with the, pardon me, I heard you could make more fish.
Well, your plate's never going to be empty. That's what you know. When you're eating with Jesus, you've got forever food.
Right,
like
right.
You eat a potato and it just appears.
Yeah.
With Allah, you have sex with a virgin, she disappears and a new one appears. So it's like replacement people.
Right.
The people in heaven last forever. They don't disappear once you've spoken to them or you've done something. You know, they don't disappear. They're there forever. Eternal means eternal in Christianity, whereas I don't think it does in Allah's little dream world. And the reward you're getting with Christianity is forever nourishment. Like, that's what people don't realize when they're talking about the bread of life. The reason it's likened to bread is because bread nourishes your body. And that's why he says you cannot live by bread alone. You need the bread of life, which is Christ's grace and the word, the truth of his word, because it's all very well eating bread to nourish your body. Yeah. But if that doesn't have any meaning to it, truth, it won't last forever. It will be nothing. Whereas the truth you'll find in this book, Jesus and the grace that he will grant you, that is something which will nourish your soul forever. And not only that, there's no limit to the amount you can get. So once you've granted yourself through your life, you know, you follow the commandments of Jesus and he gives you heaven, you get there on day one. The next day, you've got a little bit more of it. The next day, you've got a little bit more of it. And it keeps going up and up and up. And it's forever.
Yeah. Well, don't forget,
you're getting with Allah is like you've got it all on day one. You're just going to get more bored with it as time progresses. So it gets worse over time.
God is also living water. That's why he says when you drink of it, you'll never thirst again, right? Like
I absolutely love the analogy of being living water. Not principally because it's just cool anyway, but if you think about it, what can survive with no water in it?
It's the element of life. Nothing. Right.
Yeah, and not only that, what does a thing turn into when you take all the water away from it? Turns into dust. So we know everything that is turned into dust is that way because there's no God inside it. And everything that lives and grows and proliferates or multiplies and has children is only able to do that because of the water. So in terms of heaven, living water is the thing that sustains eternity. That's why people think the truth is the life, because the truth is the underlying thing which sustains the physical world, sustains God's kingdom with us being its subjects. Without it, it would just be dust, turn to nothing. But Allah, he doesn't see things that way. The thing that sustains the world is him. He's not water. He's not even able to appear in the world. He's nothing. Like we know from formidable faiths, ridiculous, crappy arguments when we turned him over as being a liar. He said Allah came to him and he saw him and he heard him and he was light and he was everything else.
No, he almost heard him. No. I will never forget that.
He was almost audible. Almost audible.
Yeah.
He almost saw him, but then he didn't see him. But then he was at the throne room, but then he wasn't. He was somewhere else. And then the best part of that video was when he said, so then I was in the throne room outside of time for about 10 minutes. Then I crashed my car. And it's like, hang on a minute. Surely you crashed, then you were unconscious. So what you're telling me is you were dreaming about Allah's paradise full of virgins, seeing this mystical, non-refractive light that you never saw. And that's the reason you crashed. So basically, your vision of Allah caused you to crash your car. That's what he physically said.
Bro.
And then he had to go back on it. Then he lost his temper, and the rest is history. Go back and watch that video, by the way. It's a funny one.
It is. The whole
that
thing
just says to me, Allah, even though he can brainwash people through his book the same way this one does, leads people to ruin, and they don't know that they're doing it.
Bro.
This book leads you to eternity, and you know every single minute of it because it has more clarity than just following someone as a slave without any understanding. This guy wants you to question him and have the answer so that you can choose it with your free will.
Yeah. I just want to point out in that story, because I just want to get this word in. When he said, I almost heard God, bro, I literally almost fell out my chair and laughed,
funny,
bro.
man.
I said, what do you mean you almost, like, if God speaks, what do you mean almost?
Yeah, I know. I thought to myself, what, has he got a really mousy, quiet voice? Is your God is like underneath a cloth? What? Can you speak up a bit, Allah? I couldn't hear you. I didn't know what you were saying.
I needed that.
Whereas when Jesus speaks, it's like, oh my God, he's real.
Man,
everything else stopped. It's like the world stopped dead. And I was like, wow, this guy's actually real. It's Jesus. Like, amazing.
Yep. Thunder.
But this guy's hearing
waves.
Allah, and he's like, can you
I didn't I almost heard you. Can you speak up just a little bit? Like,
it's like if you almost heard him, were you in complete silence then?
Yeah.
You already said you couldn't see him, you're in darkness. You're in darkness, in silence, but this is Allah's vision. Do you remember the last thing he said? He said, oh, I was only allowed to see what I was allowed to see. So it's like, okay, Allah let you have a vision of nothing where you didn't hear or see
except
anything.
the non-refracted light, though. Because remember, I'm sorry.
That bit when Lily said, so you saw his hijab then? And he said, no, Allah doesn't have a hijab. And then I put the Quran quote on that says about his veil.
Yeah,
this guy doesn't even know his own Quran. He's just like all the other fake Muslims that think they know something, but they're just repeating what they've heard from other people. And it's like, well, since Allah doesn't make any noise, it's easy to follow other people by mistake.
Right.
Obviously, what he was doing. But anyway, so
yeah.
Oh, this stream's getting long, isn't it? 2 hours. So we'll finish up on this page, then we'll conclude because I feel like we're getting a little bit over time.
All right.
So the last bit of this page, we went through the bit. Oh no, we'll finish that. So we went through. If he's angry, goad him further. You know, make your enemy angry so that he makes bad decisions. If he's humble, be overbearing. If he's trying to rest, harry him. You know, give him tasks, make him stand up. Don't let him rest because he'll get angry. If his armies are united, split them, i.e. lie to them so that they argue internally amongst themselves, and while they're looking at each other, their back is turned. Attack where he is unprepared and appear when you are least expected. So once again, we see this is what happens when you say, we're actually allies. We're actually friends. I'll watch your back. You can turn around. I'll watch your back for you. You turn around. Perfect opportunity. So that's what they're saying there. And the last sentence is, thus you may see that in war, surprise is the key to total victory. So we know path of deception, feign incapacity, lure your enemy, goad him into anger so that you can create an opportunity where his back is turned. You're going to plunge the knife in while his back is turned. And doing all of this, that surprise, that is the key to victory. The rest of this book is going to be describing that key to you. And that is the way, the method, if you like, of gaining your victory over this guy who is a Jew or a Christian. So the things they believe are this: morality, truth, love, forgiveness. This is the antithesis to this. And then the last bit is, a victorious leader plans for many eventualities before the battle. A defeated leader plans for only a few. Many options bring victory. Few options bring defeat. No options spell disaster. This is who can foresee who will be victorious and who will be defeated. So in a few words, what that's saying is, if you are limited by morality like this book tells you to be, you will be defeated because you're not willing to do everything that's required in order to totally gain victory. This book is saying, if you dispense with morality and truth and courage and honor and all the rest of it, then you will be able to always have a victory. So victory is the most important thing, more important than God, more important than you, more important than heaven, more important than the moral compass. Victory is the art of war. That's what this book is saying. You should be willing to do everything right up until condemning yourself to hell if it means beating your opponent. So we know The point of this book is saving your soul. This book is about you becoming a better person so that if everyone does it, we live in a world of better people, a better world. This book is about being able to kill your enemies. And that is where we will end our reading for today. So that's The Art of War, page 1, 2, 3, and 4. Can't believe it took us over 2 hours to go through 4 pages, but I mean, we had a lot to say on this subject. So,
Sure.
yeah, I think we'll continue with this another time, maybe next week. But for now, I just want to encapsulate our 4-page Art of War reading on saying, you can see why this will be attractive to the uninitiated, the ignorant. This book suggests that all you need to do to 100% ensure yourself a victory over any opponent is be willing to go where they're not willing to go, to be willing to do the things that they will not be willing to do. And in doing so, you become a slave to Satan, a slave to your evil impulses. That's the things this book is really describing, which this book prevents you from doing. If you're a Christian, you're not allowed to stab people in the back. You're not allowed to follow the way of deception and tell someone that you're their ally and they're your friend. I'll guard your back, bro, so that they turn their back to you so that you can stab them in it. These things are completely off limits. You'd rather die than do that. So what Jesus is telling you is you would rather die than become an evil person. Allah or Satan is telling you you would rather kill than become a good person. And that's why we know this one takes longer and is more painful, and you might well be defeated a few times in your life. But if you do this, ultimate victory will be yours, and that means salvation is your ultimate victory. Whereas if you follow this, your ultimate victory is just killing people and then dying. And that's the end of this video. So I hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. I'm going to say goodnight for myself, and I'm sure Humble Servant was an enjoyable guest for sure. He'll be saying goodnight to you as well.
Oh, yes, yes. Good night to you all, and I'm just glad to be here. And a big thanks. So it has nothing to do with the video, but a big thanks for Brother Daily Corvette allowing me to get in here and get some StreamYard training.
Oh, yeah. Everyone follow this guy's channel if you haven't already. Humble Servant's videos. Chef's kiss, double chef's kiss for that. I love this guy's video. So even though I slag off most people and I say don't follow their channels, one of the rare moments of me ever saying this, follow this guy and you will not be disappointed. So that's the end of this video. I hope you learned this. You learned something from this and you enjoyed it. God bless you all. And I'll see you, lovely, beautiful, amazing, Christian-like people, in the next one. Bye now.
Bye now.